Okay, it's now 1:15 and let's start the program. So, hello everyone and welcome to the Poet of Concrete Catalog Launch. So, this is your host Matthew Sanchez Chua and let me first tell you the program flow. So, there will be two panels. The panel 1 is Preserving Locsin and panel 2 will be Constructing Locsin. Then afterwards, there will be a question and answer portion and to be followed by the catalog launching or catalog signing, I mean. So for those of you who wants to buy the book, it is displayed at the back and mura lang, no? So okay, let's start the program. So first is panel 1, theme Preserving Locsin. So the first essay to be featured is The Legacy of Locsin by Aldo Mayoralgo. So architect Aldo A. Mayoralgo, well AP, is trained as an architect, hypnotherapist, and functional breathing instructor. He is an associate of Leandro Locsin Partners and serves as the Director for Education and Professional Development of the UAP Makati Ayala Triangle Chapter. Mayoralgo is driven by a passion to help people flourish and move forward amidst life's challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome Architect Aldo A. Mayoralgo. For our second essay, Brutalist Pilipinas by Patrick Kasingsing. Patrick Kasingsing is an art director, photographer, writer, and heritage advocate. He is the founder and co-moderator of Brutalist Pilipinas and Modernist Pilipinas, documenting the country's built heritage. He also established Canto.ph, a leading online magazine focused on design and culture in the Philippines and Southeast Asia. Previously the creative director of Blueprint, the Philippines' longest-running architecture and design magazine, Patrick also led the art direction for 4 other publications under one mega group. He redesign of Adobo magazine earned a Philippine Quill Award. His photography and writing have been featured in the Masiana project and published by renowned publishers like Birkwasser Verlag and DOM Publishers. He has contributed to Blueprint, Purveyor, Vogue Philippines, and more. A Manuel Tanchua Chaco scholar, Patrick holds a fine arts degree in information design from Ateneo de Manila University in 2012. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome Patrick Kasingsing. Okay, for our third essay, Losing Locsin by architect Harvey Vasquez. Architect Harvey A. Vasquez is the Dean of the School of Environment and Design, or SED, at De La Salle College of St. Benilde and a permanent faculty member of its architecture program. He holds a master's degree in architectural heritage conservation from the University of the Philippines. Architect Vasquez's diverse architectural experience spans both local and international projects. His research interest includes the works of Marcel Duchamp, a topic that deeply influences his approach to architecture, art, and design. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome our Dean, Architect Harvey Vasquez. And for the last essay for this panel, it's Memories of LVL's iconic Bacolod landmark by J. Albert Gamboa. J. Albert Gamboa is an award-winning co-author of 20 books, including renowned coffee table books. He also served as director and CFO of the Asian Center for Legal Excellence and is a columnist for major publications such as the Manila Bulletin, Manila Times, and Business Mirror. Albert's work earned the International Gold Quill Award in 2023 for his role as executive editor of Sugar and Smiles, the Negrense Legacy Beyond 2020. Again, ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome J. Albert Gamboa. And for our moderator for this afternoon, the curator of the Poet of Concrete, and the director of the Center for Culture and Arts, or CCA, of Benilde, De La Salle College of St. Benilde. Let's all welcome the man of the hour, architect Jerry Torres.
Thank you, Matthew. Uh, Welcome, everyone, and thank you all for coming. This is a significant day for us because we are launching the Poet of Concrete catalog, and we will be talking to the essayists and the interviewees that make up the catalog. So it is also significant that we're doing this today because today marks also the death anniversary of Lindy Locsin. No, we did not plan it; it just happened. So I guess the serendipity. And to our students, I just want to inform you that this is the project. The Poet of Concrete is an exhibit that is dedicated really to our architecture program. So what we're going to do now is going to be like a panel discussion, and our first topic for this panel is preserving Locsin. No, um, I guess we can start with Aldo because maybe you can share with us how the present Locsin office is now the preserving the memory of Lindy.
So, thank you, Architect Jerry. Good afternoon, everyone. Rinig naman sa likod. We're good. To answer your question, Architect Jerry, my name's Aldo Mayoralgo. I'm an associate at Leandro Locsin and Partners. I've been with the firm since 2012. And my essay slash interview basically talks about Mr. Locsin himself, no, who he was back then, humanizing him a little bit. Because a lot of us, when we think of him, we put him on an ivory tower, but fail to realize that he was also, just like you guys, a student before, with his own sensibilities, his own struggles. And more than that, he had a journey to sort of find himself and find what he valued in architecture, found people that could collaborate with him on this, and distilled all these thoughts into a process that endures over time, which is something that we in the firm bring to bear now. When you look at his works, a lot of us tend to think, of course, in terms of the translation in form, so the brutalist structures, the floating mass, the grounded flight, and the like. But there is something more than that, a sort of deeper subtext within the process that brings about the architecture that we as the firm want to, keep alive now. And essentially, if I could do a sort of 1 minute cheat sheet, it is that when you do a work of architecture, you have the opportunity to be clear and coherent in whatever gestures you use. So we call it the big idea in the firm, wherein this big idea is something that you craft as a singular idea that is apt to the project. You refine and reinforce this big idea with the biggest gestures and the smallest details. You use abstraction rather than literality. You try to get a collective input from everybody, so a multivariate perspective. And the most important thing is to present your work and trust that the public and hope that the public will love it, inhabit it, and cherish it over time. So in that regard, Architect Jerry, we're keeping it alive by keeping this core process at the forefront of our design work.
I find it remarkable that an architectural office that started in the 50s is still around. Usually, architectural offices, when the principal passes on, normally it would just fold up. But I think it's remarkable that the Locsin office has managed to continue and evolve with the times, no? And also, we'd also like to share with our audience that there are a number of Benildians who have worked with the Locsin office as early as, I think, 2005. no, thereabouts, with the interior design, the first interior design students. And presently, you do have Benildians in the office.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, one of my second in commands, I don't know if Vince is here yet. I had worked for him this morning kasi. But yes, even my second in command, one of my second in commands is from here, from SDA.
Okay, now on to Patrick. Um, Patrick is like a folk hero of architecture because from out of the blue, I remember during the pandemic, when I was trolling my IG, yeah, this Brute PH came out, and I got interested. And then later on, I found out that Patrick is not really an architect, but he took it upon himself to create awareness about brutalist architecture in particular. Patrick, can you share with us how that crusade began for you?
Okay, hello. Well, first start, just good afternoon, everyone. So, as Jerry mentioned, I'm not an architect. I'm actually a fine arts graduate. So, um, uh, TLDR. So, I've discovered the existence of, the concept of brutalism and Leandro Locsin when I would spend, my 7-hour breaks in between classes during university in the library. And then I discovered this really beautifully done coffee table book by Nicolas Politis entitled "The Architecture of Leandro Locsin." So I would just spend my afternoons, not just one, like multiple afternoons, poring over these photos. And for some unfathomable reason, there was just something about um, the forms and the materiality and the spaces as captured in these photographs that like resonated with me. I remember this time I was a fine arts student. I have no idea what brutalism is or who Leandro Locsin was. But at that time, this was also, when you're in university and you're a fine arts student, you also are in a way looking for an identity or I guess an approach that you resonate with. And as seen from these photographs and and the book itself, there was something about how Locsin was approaching the creation of spaces that was resonating with how I also wanted to become as a graphic designer at that time, which is I wanted to communicate what I want to say through design that is no nonsense, making use of um, limited materiality or like materials, or only using the things that I think will communicate what I want without the frills. So that's something that I was able to derive from that, those simple afternoons in the library. But let's fast forward to 2018 when I started Brutalist Filipinas. This was also the time when I resigned from Blueprint, and I was wondering, what do you call this? I was coming at the end of a career that was like really very steeped in architecture, right? And I felt like I wanted to like develop a skill, and that skill for that particular time was photography. So I like to tell people that Brutalist Filipinas began at a very selfish place. Like I really want to learn photography, so that's the intent. I wanted an excuse to go around NCR just taking photos of buildings, and I figured, okay, no one's taking photos of brutalist buildings, and I already had this, like background fascination of brutalism up to that point. And I was like, let's hit two birds with one stone. I learned photography and at the same time help document a style that's not being taken notice of. And after that, stuff happened. Stuff that I didn't expect.
It's remarkable that you said you were hooked to the architecture of Locsin because of photography. The photography of Akio
Kawasumi, if I'm not mistaken.
Kawasumi, yes, who had great photos. And two things that I would like to say about architectural photography. When the building is new and you have photographs taken of it, it actually is a good record of what it was when it was still pristine and when it has not yet been tampered so much. And I think Akiyu was able to capture the spirit of Locsin in that book, which in turn inspired you to take photos of brutalist buildings, which eventually morphed into a crusade that is now taking you into higher places like drafting petitions to save the architecture of, well, not just Locsin, but eventually the brutalist buildings that we have left in the city. So how did this transition into that more serious aspect of preserving our brutalist structures?
Right. It's so funny because I think that turning point came during the pandemic, and this was during the time when the film live theater was like, in the news, and it's in the danger. And but I won't delve not too much into it. But that I was really angry during that time, and we couldn't do anything because we're all not stuck in our houses, right? Then at that time I was like, I think we've gotten to a point in Brutalist because Brutalist Filipinas has been in existence for around 2 years by then, about 2020, 2021. And I think, as I mentioned, it came from a selfish place. But along the as the years went by, I was starting to like, come to terms with, how people are starting to regard the photos, which for me was like really an upskilling sort of thing, but it's becoming a sort of like a reference to them. And I think, it would be, I'm already here. I've already done some of the work, and it would be foolish for me not to go all in and expand and what they call this and see where it takes me, right? And I think even in university, here's the funny thing, because my thesis in fine art school was an architectural thesis. So like I designed a what they call this like I designed a visual database of heritage landmarks, which sounds very familiar, right? That's exactly what Brutalist Filipinas is. So um, I thought that was like the turning point that I had. I think I'm in this space now. It would be foolish for me not to do anything and just watch, these buildings, when I think we've gotten to a sort of like awareness, both of the public and of myself now. I know these things now, and I don't want to use the knowledge that I have of brutalism or modern built heritage and just use it to like document or create beautiful pictures. Because if I keep on doing it that way, I won't have anything to photograph. But I mean, we react to what's happening, and that's how we did it when we found out about RCB, Ramon Cojuangco, when we found out about the PCI bank building, which took the NCCA a year before they figured it was it was already being demolished, and Napocor and all these things. So um, we don't like doing this part of the job. It really, I wish we could get to a point na Brutalist Filipinas is already like, we don't need things like Brutalist Filipinas to exist in order for people to understand why buildings like this are worth preserving.
Um, uh, really, we can't even begin to discuss this topic of losing our built heritage. I mean, as we speak, there's already so many threats that are ongoing that will, definitely change the landscape, the cityscape. Sometimes not for the best. But I also want to commend you, Patrick, for creating a Flickr account of free images of the brutalist buildings that you are sharing for free.
Yes, guys, please use it.
Yeah, so as long
For
as
legal
you
stuff, okay? Don't.
as long as you credit the Brute PH and Patrick, all the images of brutalist buildings, which are actually amazing photos, are all for free to share to the public, especially to the students. So in the topic now of, we're now getting into the dangers of losing our brutalist buildings. Dean Harvey and I were discussing about how his essay will be, and it's interesting how Dean Harvey said in his essay that in a span of 5 years, we've already lost, we're going to lose 5 to 10 years. Can you sort of share with us?
Um, yeah, actually, the essay "Losing Locsin" is instigated from my other responsibility as one of the ex officio members of National Commission on Monuments and Sites. So I am one of the members that was appointed by ICOMOS Philippines. So in this commission, we are usually tasked with affirming request for demolitions. So it just so happened that within my term from 2023 to 2025, we've gone through a lot of requests for demolition. So I was always raising up to the commission, why are we just affirming all these requests? Why can't we oppose them? So there are a lot of factors, of course, in this kind of situation, and economy is one of the main factors for their decision-making process. I'm talking about the clients. So, um, as a cultural worker, it's actually frustrating, and I do also commend the works of Patrick in terms of shedding a light. So, all the documents in terms of the request for demolition, they're all available for us to see in the ncca.gov.ph website. It is by law that they should publish those requests. And when you look at all those requests, like for example, the Greenbelt, the Napocor building, the previous RCBC, the PhilAm, and now the current request on the PLDT building, if you look at all those memos, they all are citing the same reasons for demolition. So it's a cookie cut paperwork that they are doing. So when I brought this up and when I brought up this frustration, it's really a struggle to shed light in this in this situation. So I'm actually thankful for the work of private citizens like Patrick, whom have the capacity and the platform to bring forth this kind of issue. So that was the fulcrum of the essay, and of course, another responsibility that I'm handling as the dean of the School of Environment and Design is how can I use the academics and its role in the overall nation building, as what we always mention. How can we use our roles in the academic to sort of not to stop it totally, but how can we make sure that the newer generations are more aware and would be fighting for this kind of cultural properties. And if you go outside, of course, I know all of us travel. When we go to Europe, when we go to Singapore, even Japan, they are able to maintain all of their heritage buildings. Of course, they are first world countries. It's gonna be a struggle for us to do the same for third world countries, but there are ways now, especially with digital documentation, augmented reality. It's always not just preserving the actual building, but at least preserving, documenting, archiving it properly. There are a lot of ways for us to go about it. And then, how can we now use those data and information to sort of ground the newer generations of architects? So that's the overall outlook of the essay. And I was telling Sir Jerry, if you look at the works of Locsin, I'm sorry to they're really not all exceptional, right? I mean, we all know that. But as a cultural worker, I'm looking at it as a whole body of work. Every work is actually important, especially if they are already appointed as national artists. So we don't look at their works as individual works because they are a sum of their parts. So if we keep on saying that they're all the same and it's okay for us to demolish some of it because there are already duplications, we are in danger of waking up one morning and all the buildings are gone and all we have are memories. So it's not about the building being exceptional. It's actually about the building telling a story. It's about the building completing the whole language of the legacy. So I think that's how we have to look at it from that perspective, because of course not everyone is biased in a way like Patrick is, that they are attracted to this kind of buildings. Not everyone will be attracted to the brutalist style, especially in this case, in 2024. Of course, there are still followers, but what I'm saying is aesthetics, the aesthetic value of the building in these cases actually takes precedent in terms of the overall cultural input or footprint of the buildings. So in this essay, I was able to propose a few things, and in this case, I'm actually proposing a few things that should start in the senior high level, because we do have to create a grassroots level before we even talk about how this can change from the top. We really have to generate interest, generate appreciation from a younger generation. And I do commend naman the younger generation. They're more aware about our heritage. Nowadays, when you go to NCCA, a lot of the workforce are younger generation. So I was really surprised and happy that this kind of conversation about culture and heritage is being taken up by our younger generation.
Yeah, it's good because next week I have 3 days of touring the senior high in the exhibit, and when they requested for them to view the exhibit, I readily said yes, because it's true, we have to start when they're still young. Dean Harvey, can you um, maybe briefly explain to us the process of how a building is applied to be torn down, and how, I mean, what are the steps and how does it reach the NCCA and then beyond?
Um, Usually, those buildings that go through that process are the buildings that are either made by national artists or buildings that are 50 years old and above. So usually, if your building is conferred, if it's not made by a national artist, it can also be conferred important cultural property. So these are usually the churches, the Spanish colonial churches. So when you do renovations for those kind of properties, supposedly you have to seek confirmation from NCCA, and they have to look at what will you be doing to the property. Will this be intrusive to the overall essence of the building? So that's one set of the process. For buildings that are created or made by national artists in architecture, when they want to make changes, or if the changes are significant, they will usually also have to seek the permission of NCCA. But in this case, a lot of the buildings, a lot of the requests that arrive in our table are usually requests for demolition. So when you request for demolition, you have to create a assessment of the building, proving that it's really not proving your rationale of why you want to demolish the building, and then prove that a lot of the usual reasons are if they will be renovating the building cost would be the same as rebuilding or same as creating a new building. So um, that's the usual reason. The second usual reason is, which is actually funny, is that during the designing of the building, Leandro Locsin was not present in the process. He was outside the country. So these are the kind of
It's like a court. It's
reasoning.
like a court case.
Yes, these are the kind of reasoning that they use. And then they would also cite reasons of aesthetic value that are the same as other buildings that are more well known. So they sort of hint of plagiarism in the design. So these are the types of reasoning that they use. So for me as a cultural worker, I find it disrespectful because this is a national artist that we're talking about. But they do have to reason out all these things because the gravity of their reason has to be uh, the weight of the reason has to be that so that they can rationalize the demolition of the building. So when they submit this to us, this will be posted as a memo in the ncca.gov.ph website, I think for at least a month. And if there are no objections, just like what Patrick is doing when they drafted a memo of objection, if this kind of buildings doesn't receive any objection, then they will pull through with the demolition. So it is important for us, not just for the ones that are behind the scenes as cultural workers, but also for us as architecture students to be more diligent in terms of scouring and being more aware of what are the things that are up for demolition. And unfortunately, and it's unfortunate really, that we are really reactive. And that's really what's sad about all this. We only react when we know that this is already up for demolition. And inside NCCA, that's what we're trying to fight for. Being more reactive to this kind of situations. Because if the decision has already been made by the stakeholders that they would want to demolish this, it is gonna be difficult for us to overturn that decision. Because usually when they create that decision, it is decided during board meetings where the board members all has to be present. So these are important decisions that they make before they eventually submit this process. So as I think as practitioners, architects, we have to also be active in opening up the eyes of our clients on the value of the building. If there's a possibility for us to do renovation, let's push for renovation, because anyway there's this conversation about sustainability. Renovation is the most sustainable way of creating new spaces, and there are also ways like architectural drafting that Studio Gang has been doing already in the US, wherein they can extend the spaces inside the old buildings.
Yeah. Okay. So for the benefit of our audience, I just want to do a rundown of the Locsin buildings that have been demolished. The Intercon is now Ayala 1. So guys, you know Ayala 1, that used to be the Intercon that was designed by Lindy Locsin. Then we have the Mandarin, which is now Park Central Towers. And then Magnolia House before in Aurora Boulevard, which is now Robinson's Mall. Robinson's Magnolia. Okay. And then Greenbelt 1, of course, is now going to be a new Greenbelt. And PCI Bank Tower, which before was called BDO Center, was also demolished, and there's going to be a new building by this architect coming up. In danger is the PLDT building because there's a present petition for it to be demolished, and also the Napocor building along in Quezon City, which is also being applied for demolition. So, and yeah, but not by Locsin. It's not by Locsin.
So that's already 7 buildings.
That's already 7 buildings. I may have overlooked some, but Folk Arts Theater, we still don't know. Then the Sofitel Hotel, which closed recently, we don't know really what's gonna happen to them. So as we speak, we are already beginning to see the demise of brutalist buildings by a national artist. How much more brutalist buildings by non-national artists? So it's really a big question mark that's hanging in the air. Okay, now I'm going to talk to one of my schoolmates from Bacolod, Albert Gamboa. Albert, I invited Albert to participate in the catalog because both of us grew up in Lasal, Bacolod, with a chapel designed by Lindy. And I asked Albert, because he's a good writer, to write about how it was to grow up with a chapel designed by Lindy. Can you share with us, Bert, a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. Let me start by asking who in this audience are from Bacolod? Can you stand up? Ricky? Who else? Or raise your hand. There you go. Just one? Okay, anyway, um, the La Salle Bacolod Chapel is not up for demolition, thankfully.
Thank
No?
God.
And I grew up in its vicinity because my house was right across the La Salle campus, and the chapel was completed when I was in prep. So all my grade school and high school life, I was I was living with the chapel, which we took for granted because all the while we thought all chapels everywhere would look like that, no? So it wasn't really something that we were at awe. Later on, I found out that when I was studying in UP, that he also built the Chapel of the Holy Sacrifice. And then when I got married and and I now live in the vicinity of the St. Andrew Chapel Church in Bel Air. That's another Locsin work, no, of art. So when Jerry invited me to write in the catalog, it was really a nostalgic trip for me. Um, like Blast from the Past, I went through our old yearbooks at the risk of carbon dating ourselves. No? We were in grade school during the late 60s up to the early 70s, and high school in the late 70s. So, but in college, I went to the other school, Ateneo, and took up a course which is not related at all to architecture. I took up economics, and later on in UP, MBA. No? So, regarding the chapel in the Salbacolod, it was the center of our after class life, no? Because that's where we would most
Get
students
picked
would
up.
wait for their drivers to be picked up. It was near the gym, beside the gym and the huge parking lot. So it was like where people kids would go up and down the sides, which was you'd call it Grecian or Parthenon-like. No? Yes. It was the scene of so many eventful activities like our first Holy Communion, our what do you call this? The yearbook photos, and also the graduation in 1978 was the backdrop for the Silver Jubilee of the Salbacolod. So they transformed it into a theater, it was called the Handumanan Theater, named after the celebration. And as I shared with Ricky, we that was also the scene of unmentionable, uh, youthful, yes, having to do with medical marijuana, as I could say it. And this was during martial law, no? So you'd imagine the risks we took because because that area was really conducive. So baka may mga
That's,
PDA
that's a new
dito.
point of view, Bert.
Tell all. Anyway, other memories of the chapel. Well, about Lindy Locsin, um, it's strange that in Bacolod everyone's related to everyone else, but in his case, we are not related by blood, but by affinity. His wife is actually cousin of my grandfather, and yeah, maternal grandfather. So his works, all these years, like the CCP, PICC, um, my what do you call this? My experience with them were all pleasant. Watching concerts, there were the scenes of um, all these cultural performances, and even the hospitals that he has in Quezon City. So a varied work, a body of work that is really what do you call it? That is really worthy of emulation for the young architects here in Benilde, no? So okay.
I I think the La Salle Chapel, we call it the La Salle Chapel, is one of the lesser known works of Locsin. It's not even in the major books. It's only recently that it's being rediscovered. But for us, it's always been there, you know. And later on, we learned it was by Lindy Locsin. Lindy is also from Negros. And the client who commissioned him to do the chapel is named Corazon Locsin Montelibano. The client is actually his auntie, no? So in Bacolod, you get your nephew to design, and so that's why it's all like all in the family kind. And the Montelibanos also donated the land where La Salle Bacolod now is. So and he is related to the
There's a
Montelibanos.
backstory to that actually. The Montelibanos donated it first to the Jesuits, but since there was a prohibition at that time, I think the LaSalle brothers and the Jesuits had an agreement that the Visayas would be for LaSalle and the Mindanao and Luzon will be for Ateneo. So they had to decline the offer, and then that's when the LaSalle brothers were approached, no, by the Montelibanos for the donation of the how many hectares?
10.
10 hectare campus, which up to now stands. It's now known as University of Saint LaSalle, USLS.
And yeah, so okay, but not anymore, Bert, because there's Ateneo already in Iloilo, and
There's going to be a LaSalle, a USLS Iloilo campus. also.
ISLS Iloilo. So I think that that deal has now been rescinded. Yes, but Bert, I just want to remind you that the original plan of our chapel had the altar in the middle, and you and I, we were still able to see that original plan. Later on, the altar was pushed to the back, so the plan was altered. What do you think of that thing being moved, of the altar being moved to one side?
Mm, it sort of diminished the design and the layout. I would prefer it to be in the middle, like the UP Chapel, no? Where everyone surrounds it from all sides.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And by the way, the earliest plans I saw in the Locsin office of the La Salle Bacolod Chapel was 1958. So it actually predates the CCP by about 10 years. Although the plan was not constructed until about 1966, thereabout. But it still predates the CCP. Now, if you go to the exhibit downstairs, you see a photo of the La Salle Chapel. It has the slopes, the curve that Lindy applied also to the CCP. So it predates the CCP by, the design by a decade. I also want to add that nowadays in Bacolod or when you go to Negros, there's always this, they promote the ruins, the ruins as the Taj Mahal of the Philippines, which of course, I have to stop my eyeballs from rolling upwards every time I see it because I don't think it has any connection at all to the Taj Mahal. But I think that if we name the La Salle Bacolod Chapel as the Parthenon of the Philippines, that would have more weight because if you look at it now, if you look at the form and the design of Lindy, it really is, more similar to the Parthenon than the ruins will ever be. Okay, I just want to pose this question to everyone. We have been talking about the danger of losing our brutalist buildings and in particular the Locsin structures. In the face of the strong forces of economics and politics, how do you foresee all of these actions that we've seen already in the past 10 years? How do you see all of this in the next at least 5 years, maybe. What is your fearless prediction?
So my fearless prediction is that the efforts of people like Patrick will bring us to no demolitions in the next time. No, I'm kidding. I don't know, but I think the reality architecture, you know, because for perspective, the the project I've been working on for the past 10 years is actually the former site of the Mandarin Hotel. So I've been on the project from the very start when the developer and us were thinking about the entire gamut of what to do to the site, from full preservation to full demolition, everything in between. And so we saw the process behind that. No, I was there during the final structural audit of the Mandarin because that was one of the, I think, the basis of why it was being requested to be demolished. I remember taking a picture of PCI Tower from the interior of Mandarin Hotel. You could see the reflection of Mandarin on the PCI Tower. Now it was like, in retrospect, that photo says, "Wait, pare, you're next." I don't know. It's a multivariate thing. Ultimately, what will really help in preserving a lot of these structures is, number one, of course, if the public shows that they love and value these buildings prior to them being announced that they are for demolition. That's number one. Number two, I think it has to do with legislation as well. The unfortunate reality is that there aren't enough incentives for developers, no, in terms of taxation and the like, that make it make it sensible to maintain a lot of these buildings. Taxes for the land increase, land values increase. They are not able to really utilize it, so that's another thing. Um, so ultimately, we need to show that these buildings are important to us. We need to also make more sense for the people that actually own these buildings. And I do see, like you said, that a lot of the younger generation, hopefully, they will catch on a little bit. We are in a bit of a precarious, not precarious, but an interesting situation. Whereas, if you look at a lot of the very old cities like Florence and the like, everybody knows that it's heritage, right? Here in the Philippines, especially here in Metro Manila, we feel in the firm that we did have that character. Old Manila had that character. World War II came in, destroyed everything. Suddenly, we have this instant city, and people don't see these buildings that were built in the 50s and 60s as heritage because we have not, kumbaga, had enough generations to sort of solidify that. So yeah, those are some of the forces. I am hopeful at the same time. I know that we can't be too idealistic because all developers now, when a building is 48 years old or 47 years old, you can bet that they're already doing the pre-design conceptualization for what will happen. So yeah.
Patrick?
Okay, I wish I could be positive about this, but I mean, echoing what Aldo said, really, that's the reality right now. And what I'm hopeful for are, I guess, and this is also why I really treasure my experience with Brutalist Philippines. Just to correct, it's not just me. Brutalist Philippines is Eldri Infante, Carl Castro, and everyone who's following, contributing to it. So that's Brutalist Filipinas. So I'm just heartened with the my observations that I'm getting from running the advocacy about how people because the aesthetic of it is always the starting point, right? But I think what's resonating with us now is the experiences of people working, living, and interacting with these buildings, with these brutal structures, with this modern built heritage, right? So, and for us, it's that's what we're using to guide when ourselves, the team, when we write these position papers. At the end of the day, the aesthetic of it is not something that's exclusive to an architect, right? But the experiences of people working in a particular space, parang yun na yung merong may weight for us, and that is where the value of the building, I think, shifts. And this shift will only happen if a building lasts a particular length of time, right? So we're actually depriving a lot of our buildings this particular opportunity to like really forge a connection with its users and with the city at large. And What I am hopeful for is, I mean, based on people we've what they call this, interacted with in our exhibits and our tours, is that, there are the seeds are there. I mean, you've already gone beyond, I think, awareness, at least from the people I talk to. But I mean, as long as the appreciation is there, the beginnings of appreciation is there, um, that heartens us. And I know, I think there will never be, what they call this, a success of all these, drives to preserve our heritage buildings will only really be successful if it's if it's a public conversation. It's not something that should be, held in boardrooms with just heritage advocates, with just architects, with just cultural people. It should be a conversation that's open to, the public, people who interact with the building, people who made memories in the building, who use it. And I think this is something that I wish would, improve in the next 5 years or so. That this conversation will take place, and that it will be more open, and that the decisions to, you know, um, keep a building or not is something that the public had a say in.
I think it's interesting what you say that you wish that the people who lived or work in those buildings will share their experiences. Because as architects, we normally just look at the building as a form of design, but we forget the feeling of being inside a building. And in my experience, especially when I was doing research for this exhibit and I would go to the Locsin building, um, if you go to a building that's designed 50 years ago, it's a different feeling as opposed to a building that was designed last year. Because of course the sensibilities change, but we will lose that experience of being in a building that was designed 50 or 100 years ago if the buildings disappear. So that is what is valuable for us architects, to be able to experience all kinds of buildings. You so Hart, what can you say?
I'll take the more positive route naman. In the Philippines, we usually have a more serious conversation if it already started internationally. Kapag pinag-uusapan na sa labas, then it becomes more of an urgent concern here in the Philippines. And we are working hard to apply and include Locsin in one of the UNESCO accreditations in terms of modern heritage. So currently, there is a overall understanding on the difference of heritage and modern heritage building. Kasi previously we lumped them all in one category, wherein heritage includes all the Spanish colonial buildings, and then of course the modern heritage of Locsin and other modern architects. But recently, there is also a growing trend and a growing realization that it's actually not a one size fits all understanding. And modern heritage has been growing in terms of its recognition. So I'm hoping that the newer generation would be able to get into that movement in terms of trying to appreciate, preserve, also experience our modern heritage. Just like what Sir Jerry has mentioned, their experiences with the Lasal Chapel. That's actually a form of appreciation for modern heritage buildings. And for us, what's close is the CCP. We've always had interactions with the CCP, and they are renovating the CCP. Of course, it's safe to say na it will not be demolished any day, any year from now. So our task is to, when it's done, let's appreciate the building, let's experience the building, let's go into the building and try to understand what made the building special, so that the newer generations can then understand and transfer all this new knowledge, and 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 be able to create new modern heritage. So for me, although we are of course struggling with the preservation, struggling with the core values what we need to do, but at least appreciation has started. Just like what Patrick has already started, we are in need of newer generations to take up that mantle, not just for brutalist buildings. Baka naman may ibang movement that you guys want to highlight, and I think the newer generations are really up for the challenge. So it's just that nga lang, how to overturn yung mga policymakers that are sitting in the decision-making chairs right now. It's really hard to overturn that. But I think the overall, the newer generations, you have to have a say in your future.
Yeah.
So be more forceful.
So we will plant the seeds here in Benil.
To, to add to what my fellow panelists have been saying, I would like to make a call of action to all you Benildian architects to be more vocal to speak up when you see any of these demolitions being planned. You should be more what do you call this? Like you should do petitions, mobilize yourselves. Just don't keep silent about these issues that will affect your generations and the ones coming after you. No? So I hope you will learn to, you in the Gen Z will be for what do you call this? The new soldiers of architecture, of preserving architecture, especially the ones of national artists. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So with that, please give us a round of applause to our panelists for this very insightful discussion. Thank you, Aldo, Patrick, Dean Harvey, and Albert, for sharing with us. Yeah, please stay because we are going to open. I'm sure the students have a lot of questions. Please stay for the Q&A after. Thank you.
Okay, so that concludes our first panel discussion, theme preserving Locsin. By the way, who here are taking up his R4? Can you please raise your hands? Konti lang? Okay. I've heard from your mentors that they will be giving you plus points if you happen to ask good questions later during the question and answer portion. So, for panel 2, theme constructing Locsin, the first essay that is featured is Locsin's Legacy in Concrete, Modern Heritage Beloved, Besieged, and Conserved by architect Gerald Lico. Professor Gerard Lico is a leading authority in architectural history, theory, and conservation at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. A practicing heritage conservation architect, Professor Lico has been involved in the restoration of key landmarks such as the Manila Metropolitan Theater and Rizal Memorial Coliseum. He is also an accomplished author, curator of architectural exhibitions, and filmmaker with numerous documentaries on Philippine architecture to his credit. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome Professor Gerald Lico. Our next essay is You Can Never Be Too Thin by architect A.J. Javier. Architect A.J. Javier is the managing principal of Javier Design Studio. He graduated cum laude from the University of the Philippines in 1995 with a degree in architecture. He placed 10th in the state licensing exams and founded his firm JDSMC in 1996. As one of the co-founders of Benil's architecture program, he played a key role in designing the curriculum. He was involved with Benil's Hub of Innovation for Inclusion, or commonly known as Hi-Fi, up to 2019. Let's all welcome A.J. Javier. Our third essay is Bridging Modernism, the Parallel Visions of Mies van der Rohe and Leandro Locsin. by architect Enzo Belandres. So architect Enzo P. Belandres is an architect and educator at De La Salle College of St. Benilde, where he graduated. He holds a master's degree in integrated architectural design from La Salle, Barcelona, Universitat Ramon Llull. His expertise focuses on climate responsive architecture and operative mapping for design. As the principal of Plus02 Architectural Design Studio, architect Belandras advocates for intentional design with an emphasis on cultural relevance and environmental integrity. His recent work was shortlisted at the 2024 World Architectural Festival under the Future Residential Project and won for the Carbon and Climate category. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome architect Enzo P. Belandres. And the last but not the least, the CCP National Theater Rehabilitation by architect Gido Bulatao. Architect Gido Bulatao is an associate at Leandro Locsin Partners, where he has been contributing since 2009. His notable projects include work on the Philippine Stock Exchange, the renovation of the Ayala Museum, and the Tanghalang Ignacio Jimenez Block Box at the Cultural Center of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, let's all welcome architect Gido Bulatao. And again, our moderator, the man of the hour, architect Jerry Torres.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, so panel 2. This time we're going to be talking about constructing Locsin. And here on stage, ladies and gentlemen, are four gentlemen who will be able to give us insightful views about Locsin's buildings. I'd like to start with you, Jidu, because I know that you are working on a project that a lot of people are interested in, which is the rehabilitation of the CCP National Theater, the most iconic Locsin building. If you can just briefly share with us what the involvement of the Locsin office is and the general work that's being done with the building.
Right. So naturally, as a building from the 1960s, from 1966 to 69, the CCP has accrued its fair share of aging and damage over time. As an underfunded institution, it's also not been as cared for as it deserves. So in 2018, 2019, they started doing a formal audit on the CCP, found that it had a number of problematic things going on with its systems. Naturally, as a building from the 1960s, 50 years on, you would have all of these aging effects. So initially, they had engaged a first set of designers to do an audit and a design to rehabilitate the building, basically to bring it up to code. They had brought on Locsin to make sure that whatever the works after that would still be very much in line with the architectural intent, as well as make sure that the works are still very much representative of the level and standard of a national theater that we would like for the Philippines. So that's been our job so far, is to make sure that the rehabilitation works, to bring it up to code, is up to par and in line, and that's involved a lot of work and a lot of sleepless nights, just trying to make sure that before anything that can't be undone is put in place, that it's done correctly from the get-go, so that we're able to make sure that the CCP is able to stand another 50 to 100 years. And it's a very much a usable building, it's a usable theater for the public, rather than just a physical sculpture to be seen from afar.
And you have had the opportunity to really look at the building from the inside as well as from the outside. What can you say about Lindy Locsin's design of the National Theater?
It's it's a nothing say, right? We're from Locsin, but until I actually got to see the plans, for example, I never really had an appreciation for how well puzzled together the CCP was. how well the different performing venues inside it stack, how well the circulation sort of flows, given that you can imagine the main theater itself has several levels. So you enter from one floor and you exit at a lower level and you're on a completely different level of the building. When you see what's inside the building and its guts after the skins have been removed, you get to see how massive and yet how elegant the structural system is. How elegant the forms are even without the skin. And that's something that very, very few people are actually able to appreciate. And I count myself lucky to be able to witness and study and try to absorb in my own practice and sort of sensibilities.
And of course, this building was designed by hand. No computing. It was all imagining without any 3D programs or software to aid it. Gerard here, I think it's interesting to talk about what you're doing because you're similar to what Judo is doing, but you are now in the process, or is it already nearly done, with two Locsin buildings, the SWAT Cap and the Nutrition Center in Taguig. No? Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Okay, yung isa no was threatened no by the subway, no. It was supposed to be the idea no, the nutrition center. The idea was to dismantle the building and re-erect it nearby, no. But it devalues, no. It devalues the building, no.
Wait. Is it possible to dismantle a concrete building?
It's possible, but it's very difficult, and its integrity will be tampered with, no. So that's why it's so after several of course, na alam naman natin na declare yung no yung nutrition center as an important cultural property. So it's no longer allowed no by law na to dismantle the building. So the subway system had to inurong yung station, no?
Which is now stopped. The
Hindi naman
subway
no?
project has now been
Hindi naman
put
stop,
on
no,
hold.
but a realignment no was
Okay.
in order, no, and then the station was relocated nearby, no, in the Senate building. However, there are also measures no to protect no the building during the construction of the subway. So yung ano man yun? TRB, tunnel boring machine, no? Tunnel boring machine, dadaan kasi pa rin doon sa ilalim, no? So we need to know no yung vibration, yung effect niya, because the building, the nutrition center, and the three buildings no in the social development complex, no, minadali siya, no, minadali siya sa mababaw yung mga foundation, so it's very delicate, no. So in fact, no, when we were looking at the building, it's already compromised, no, because it's 50 years old. So marami ng crack, no? And there are interventions that are not sympathetic, no, to Locsin's aesthetic vision. So right now we are negotiating with the NCCA because I also work with the OTR as a consultant, how to protect the structure during the tunnel boring process. So yung isa naman, no, on the other side no, of the complex is a property of the SWD, no. So syempre alam niyo naman DSWD social work, no, napabayaan din yung building, and we are now no because the new secretary no is also a fan of architecture, no? So that's why he tried to restore the building to its original, and hopefully no we can invite Mrs. Marcos no to inaugurate the building early, no.
The original Mrs. Marcos?
Yes. The original madam, no? The one with the edifice complex. Anyway, I don't know. Of course, these buildings, no, they are made of concrete. No? Many assume that concrete is a maintenance-free material. No? It's false, no? Because you have to look at concrete every 50 years, no? Because marami talaga siyang especially siguro nagmamadali nung time na tinayo yung mga buildings na to. Kasi even population center, no, it's a property of department of iba-iba yung may-ari, no, iba-iba yung may-ari ng building. But the land is owned by DepEd, but iba-iba yung may-ari ng building. So may ano, no, may mga inherent defects, no, yung concrete as a material, of course, cracking, and siguro minamadali yung building at that time. Ang ano, no, parang na-demystify sa akin si Locsin, bakit wala siyang mga ano, wala siyang mga downspout. Ganun ba talaga? Ah, hindi, kasi ano siya, no, talagang problematic yung mga tubig, no? Yung water, kaya we had a lot of discoloration, no? So we cannot reverse the discoloration. Ano, no, sabi nga ni ano, maitim, may mga patches. So, but of course, these are patina, no? Patina of age, no? Na we should recognize, hindi naman perfect yung ano, no? Yung modernism. No?
So, Gerard, for the benefit of the audience, you are working on one of the buildings of the complex, which is made out of 3 buildings, correct?
Actually, 2.
You've started on one,
Yeah,
because I saw the photos, and this would be the SWAT Cap.
the SWAT cap.
The SWAT Cap building. Okay, the second one is still being
Yeah.
negotiated.
Mhm.
Okay, let's talk about the SWAT Cap. When you renovated it, you tried to uh, uh, replicate the concrete works of Locsin.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
How was that experience? Was it possible with the kind of labor we have now?
It's very difficult to replicate, no, because it's bush hammered, no, so it's very labor intensive. So but we devised, no, a way to dun sa mga minor areas, no, to replicate the same using formworks, no. And unfortunately, yung yung interior ng SWAT Cap was painted, no, with a gray paint, no. It should be left untouched, no, as a brutalist building. So, what can I do, no? Tinry namin talagang 7 coats of paint remover na hindi pa rin natatanggal, no. So, pag ginawa namin yun, it would do more damage, no. Siguro we can wait, no, for a new technology to remove those paint, no. But for now, we just make yung paint na yun, dinaya na lang namin through a painting technique to make it look more brutalist, no, rather than a flat gray wall. So, one of the difficulties pa, ang daming intervention dun sa building, no, and the building had to be energy efficient, no. So, most of the modern buildings that we have, not only of Locsin, are very energy wasteful siya sa energy. So what we did was to do an energy audit, no, and do an energy retrofit, no. Pinalitan lahat ng bintana, may tint na, as long as these are reversible intervention. But first, bago tong mga intervention na to, we have to perform, no, a conservation management plan, no. Ano ba yung conservation management plan? It's a document, no, that tells us ano yung meron sa building, what are the significant parts, what are the character defining attributes that needs to be protected, para hindi matamper yung value niya. So the policies, no, that we devise should ensure, no, that the retention of that value. So tinanggal namin yung mga addition that we think na hindi naman in the spirit of Locsin's design, no? Especially may tubo talaga sa harap ng building, no? So yun na lang, hindi namin matanggal kasi nga ang hirap ng mga downspots. So tinago na lang namin on a secondary wall, no? And mimicking the texture of Locsin. So this is just a dry wall, no? So in the future, kaya in conservation, whatever you introduce to the building should be reversible in the future, no? Yun yung ating first important law, no? Least intervention, the best form of conservation, and reversible. Ano pa ba yung ikikwento ko? Basta madaming madami kaming yung tapos yung mga aircon units, no? Nakalabas lang sa bintana, it really it's really a scar, no?
Okay, back then, most aircon are window types. What did
At saka the intention was really to make it a tropical building. That's
so
why there's
no aircon.
no aircon. So later on, in-add-on na yung aircon. So talagang nasira yung facade. So we had to make an air conditioning system that is talagang nakatago, no? Concealed from, talagang maganda na yung facade ngayon, no? Ano pa ba yung major works? At tapos ang isang problema namin doon, yung isang original na, no, na hindi naman kami ang may kasalanan, no, yung north-south, no, yung north-south commuter train, dadaanan niya yung ano, no, yung powerhouse. No, yung powerhouse brutalist talaga. May curve pa nga gano'n, ano.
Also by
Oh,
Locsin?
also by Locsin. So, syempre, dadaanan yun. In-anticipate na namin. So, nagtayo kami ng katabing, ano, no, katabing powerhouse of similar, ano, no, similar design. Pero definitely, tatamaan siya ng expansion ng north-south commuter. So, ito yung problema natin, no, in development, talagang meron tayong mako-compromise na modern buildings.
How long did the work take you?
Actually, the project started, no, 2 years, no, 2 years in the making siya, no. So, but it's you have to start bago kasi these are assumed, no, or presumed important cultural property. When we do this, because automatic, no, works of national artists are presumed important cultural property. Before you work on it, no, you have to ask permission, no, from the cultural agency, no. I-approve nila yung intervention, yung methodology mo, and of course we pass naman that and yun, no, medyo matagal yung process. At saka yung concrete talaga, it's a very difficult material to work with, and there are a lot of graffiti, no, that we cannot remove.
Okay. It's good that you mentioned concrete because you mentioned to me last time that the city of Makati is starting to do policies that will protect
Yeah.
the concrete brutalist buildings of the city. So is that going to push through?
Actually, right now we have a table reading, no, which I exited early, no. So table reading for the law, no. So the city of Makati is drafting its own heritage law, no, which is geared towards the preservation of its modern assets, no. So medyo sabi, but tinatanong nga ako ng mga councilor tsaka mga lawyers, bakit daw mas strict pa yung batas na to kaysa sa national law. Ayun. Bakit daw mas mahigpit, no? Kasi ano bang asset ng Makati as a modern city? It's modern buildings, no? 'Di ba? So, but of course, there should be a balance, no? There should be a balance. Ano ba yung, kasi di ba, we cannot stop naman development. So that's why meron pa ring process of approval, no? May process of delisting, no? In the same way that what we do, no, in the national level.
But I think it's a step in the right direction, no? That the cities, the LGU levels of the government already step in. Kasi kailangan, I think after the national, you go na LGU because you have to take care of your own city and what you have in your own city. Especially now, all the cities want to be tourist places. If you remove all of these heritage buildings, you're already removing potential tourist sites, no? Oo. Okay, AJ. AJ and I had always an interesting discussion when we were talking about what I was asking him to write for the catalog. I asked him, AJ, what happened to the form concrete, what is the correct term? The thin shell concrete construction that we used to do in the 50s and the 60s here in the Philippines. Before, you would have all of these space age designs in buildings, even nga bus stops, parang we used thin shell construction. So I asked AJ to investigate how that style or process can still be, if that can still be done today. So, AJ, can you share with us what you've found out?
Well, yung hatol kasi doon hindi masyadong maganda eh. So, during that investigation, that very quick investigation that I did.
AJ, by the way, I just want to share that in the investigation of AJ, we made the UP
Chapel
as the exemplar.
Yes. But the trigger question to me was exactly that. Why do we not see any thin shell concrete builds anymore? Well, the answer was very obvious naman from an architect's perspective. I mean, from my perspective, was because it's not, its inviability is very evident both economic and technical. On the technique itself it's not viable. But I did not want to just rest on that clumsy conclusion. So I went on to the most credible, I thought the most credible person or party source of information that could give me particular answers. And this is David M. Consunji, the contemporary of, well, for the students, David M. Consunji is the DM Consunji, DMCI of that developer. They were a general contractor before, and they still are. So David M. Consunji is a contemporary of Leandro Locsin. They were both young during the 1950s when Leandro Locsin was commissioned to do the chapel by Father Delaney. It was David Consunji who was recommended by then Secretary of Minister of Transportation, Huinio, to build the structure. And from that investigation, hinanap ko kasi, so I had to take hold of David Consunji's book. Dinescribe ni Consunji doon kung paano how he had to also muster enough mental innovation on how to build Locsin's design. If you go there, and I recommend that you all do, if you are studying, if you are serious in studying architecture, because that is a very excellent and fine specimen of honesty in design. Walang tambol yung building na yun eh. Makikita mo lahat. At least that I know of. I've experienced that personally because I studied there. And I go there almost every week because my org is in that little compound. So we pray there, we hold service, and it's such a very honest building. When that time, tinuturuan kami on what honesty in design is, hindi ko siya maintindihan. Yung pala yun, after I graduated, doon ko palang naintindihan na that was honesty in design, structurally and tectonically. So, it is a very good lesson in architecture. Wala kasi siyang tambol. And now, when I wrote the article, now with the lens of David M. Consunji on how he intended to build it, all the more it became so valuable as a specimen of good architecture in that particular mode of design, yung brutalist. Paano ginawa ni David? Pinagmamalaki niya dun sa libro na, number one, hindi sila gumamit ng pumpcrete. Pumpcrete is that apparatus where you shove the concrete into a pump and then spray it on the membrane. Because generally or ordinarily, how to make a thin shell concrete now, ginagamitan na ng fabric membrane para madali. Okay, so you put up scaffolds, and we now normally use tensioned or pre-tensioned scaffolds para mas less material, and then there is a fabric sheath that will assume the shape of the catenaries, and then sasabuyan ng concrete with this modern apparatus. And it was very easy. So, tatapunan ng concrete, patutuyuin yung manipis na layer ng concrete, maghihintay, and then babalikan ulit, tatapunan ulit, hanggang sa kumapal na kumapal. And of course, andun na yung reinforcement, yung mesh, nandun na rin. The fabric also acts as a reinforcing membrane. Back then, David decided we are not using pumps, and in fact, we are not using any high technology material. Kasi nagsisimula pa lang si David Consunji noon. Ano pa lang siya noon? It's like a little boutique contracting firm. But they did get projects already. But ito'y talagang test of his intellectual prowess. So they built what they did. They built of course the form of the dome to support everything as it should, and then nagpagawa siya ng 4 na towers. He calls them concrete pouring towers. They are actually moving. It rotates around the building. The 4 of them rotates around the building as they are pouring. No, not automatically, so they move it slowly. So, mayroon siyang mga rampa, yung tawag dito, yung buggy, yung may dalawang gulong na parang may lalagyan ng semento. Ayan, tinutulak nila yung paakyat doon sa dome. Nung na-pour na nila yung beam, yung perimeter beam, yung tension beam, naggawa na sila ng 4 na tower, inakyat nila ang semento doon at ibinuhos nila doon inside the double formed thin shell. So, pinapasok doon. Of course, meron na silang method. And then, gagalaw nila ngayon yung tower, iikot yung 4 na yun. Counterclockwise pala. Tapos, mag-aakyat ulit sila, bubuhos nila until they reach the summit of that dome. Okay? And then, they removed all the forms, they smoothened it out, plugged all the punctures, kasi may punctures yun because of the forms. And that's how they did it. He asked the permission of Minister Huino, what he thought about it. And Minister Huino was back then the dean of the engineering center, the college, whatever, I forget. Basta, it's the engineering center, I think. And then he was actually very amazed at the ingenuity of David Consunji. So,
AJ, sorry.
Yeah.
And this had to be done in one day, correct?
Yes, they
Right?
needed to do this monolithically kasi oras na tinigil nila yon, magkakaroon na ng some... Yes, oo. Kailangan monolithic yon, hindi obra na may
Na may
putol yun.
dugtong,
Oo. And the drama of that narrative in that book is babagyuhin pa dapat sila nun eh. So, doon lang yata sa spot nila hindi umulan. I don't know.
Yeah.
Nagdasal kasi si Lindy ng matindi. Hindi, loko lang.
Madaming itlog na binigay.
So, imagine that. Imagine doing that now with our collective impatience in construction as project managers and builders, going through all of that, moving those towers around ever so slowly within the entire day, mobilizing that that manpower of almost biblical numbers to just move it around. No, hindi naman biblical yung ginamit niya. Pero I would imagine na ang daming taong kailangan, no? They could afford it back then. Hindi na natin siya pwede. It could not be transposed to this time now. Even if we use the modern methods, which now brings me to that second aspect, why it is not viable, I would imagine. Because I would not do it myself. Yung repeatability kasi niya is not there anymore. Especially for civic and sacred structures, talagang it's a one-off. The UP Chapel is a one-off thing. It's one creation. It's one sculptural thing. So, and of course, the second agenda of that essay was to give a public commentary on the deplorable design state of our civic and sacred architecture, no, on how ugly they are, but and unintelligent. Hindi na natin kung gusto natin ng matalino maganda in that respect of the UP Chapel or the TWA airport in New York, hindi na natin gagawin yun ngayon eh. We will all replace it with aluminum composite panels, which sorely lacks the gravitas and the intelligence of concrete as a material with its honesty. Puro kasinungalingan ang binibigay ng ACP. Okay? Kasi tinatago niya lahat. In that intelligent respect. So, hindi na siya magawa ngayon. No businessman in his right mind, no parish priest with using donation money would ever risk build a church in that The only fine specimen that I saw is in Cebu. Thin shell concrete. It's a fine church as well. I forget the name, sorry. But it's younger than the Locsin building. So that's the answer. It is a nostalgia item. Kung natutunan ko sa yan. It's an item of nostalgia. Makes us feel good. But unfortunately, I don't think I'd want to endure the punishment of making that again to recreate the nostalgia for myself.
And the three of you are from UP. No? Right. So, well, I'm glad that that building will not be in danger. Also like the La Salle Chapel because it's owned by a school. So, we better take care of it. I read somewhere, I was reading a book about architecture, and the author said, with the realities of today, especially in the third world, where we have more labor than materials that we can afford, maybe we should turn to architecture that is going to be made by hand. Now, I'm asking this question because we are being taught here in Binil parametric architecture with all these fantastical forms and shapes. How do you translate that into a country like the Philippines? This vision that we are teaching our students, and how can that then be? How can they see that in reality with what we have now in the country? So, is there a disconnect
Do
with
you want me to answer that?
yeah, you used to teach here. Go.
How, what your question is, the parametricism of design right now?
Yeah, how do we reconcile that with the realities of construction that you just said is impossible to do nowadays, even with just the simple thin shell construction of 1955?
Oh, very analog pa kasi yung protocol natin of construction dito eh. So we can with so much energy to expand both from the labor force and the intellectuals of the project build. Kaya naman talaga manually because all of those came from an analog procedure anyway. But yung maganda kasi dito, mura pa kasi yung up to now naman, miski na tumaas na yung wages, mura pa rin generally ang labor force natin. The construction labor force is still very affordable. Whether we want them to stay there or not, that's another political and social answer and question and answer to grapple with. But right now, they are there and we benefit from it, and it's a painful fact to accept. So in short, kung merong pasensya yung builder, the sponsor, the the padron, the client, we can all mobilize this labor and then attempt to educate them to a particular level na they can execute the parametric nature of design. Yung UP Chapel, in its very essence, is very parametric because if you do reduce that to computation, it follows this particular parameter of reduction of material up to the very summit and then going back. So that is parametric architecture. But in the manner of a Zaha Hadid, Bjarke Ingels parametricism, which requires complex formulas of manipulating fenestrations, protrusions as it moves across the building. That is very hard to execute right now. I don't know of any contractor locally who can execute that kind of project. Maybe that's the reason why Zaha Hadid's firm does not have any project here yet.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Jido and I worked together in a project before, and the design sometimes cannot be executed by even the best contractors. And so for me, it's a bit frustrating for us architects. You know, we do this beautiful design, and then it comes to construction, and then you hit a blank wall. Anyway, Enzo, now we're going to talk about, you are a practicing architect, you're a young architect, and you studied in Barcelona. You wrote about Miss Van der Rohe's Barcelona Pavilion, the classic, and of course our own classic also, which is the PICC. And you mentioned about, what I distinctly remember is that you talked about light and shadow in the space when you talked about the two buildings. Can you share with us how you found the two buildings similar and also different?
Similar. Yeah. First, thank you, Sir Jerry, for actually opportunity to be here. First, in retrospect, let me be just candid. Also, you gave me that opportunity to write when I came back here in Manila, so I had to try to remember all the visits that I did to the Barcelona Pavilion, just to be able to create a parallelism to the PICC. In terms of that parallelism, I would, of course, echo some of the words that the panelists have said, like the elegance of the PICC, the honesty of the material. Those things are also evident with the pavilion itself. I've been to the pavilion like many times, numerous times, even though there is an entrance. I really tried to visit it a lot of times because it was really a sight to behold. It was a lot of learnings just being able to observe it. On the play of light and shadow, as you said, there was this intricate understanding of how the forms, the shapes could actually implement that. And those things were kind of the bridging ideas that I used in that essay to form a parallelism between the PICC of how monumental it is, of how heavy the forms are. It creates a certain gravitas, but at the same time, it's also very light. The same way that it's light in terms of the Barcelona Pavilion, but the difference of that is that the Barcelona Pavilion uses light materials or slender materials. So, in honesty, it was very difficult the article to write because the two materials or the two architects were so different in terms of culture, in terms of timeline, in terms of history. But at the same time, the practice or the approach had a kind of parallelism to it or a kind of sameness to it because while Mies had this, of course, Mies is Mies, yeah. He has this less is more. It's a universal. It's already accepted as a universal approach, but uh, with Lindy, even though there is also that parallelism of that universal approach that he was doing, there was this sensitive or sensitivity to our Filipino context that it in terms of more of our culture, our environment, our climate. So it's not just about using the material or using concrete as a terms of creating a monument, but more of exhibiting it as part of the culture and as part of our environment as well.
And I remember we had to, cause I had to convince Enzo to write about the Barcelona Pavilion and Locsin, because the Barcelona Pavilion is one of my favorite buildings. And then I told him, I bet you that when Locsin was a student in UST, he would come across Miss Van der Rohe, because at that time all of the heroes of the architecture students of the 50s would be, the modernists like Miss. But I'd also like to ask again, Jids, you mentioned before that when you guys would try to recreate the finishes, the concrete finishes of Locsin in some of the buildings, you found it difficult. No, the formula is lost, or maybe because I remember when I talked to Ed Ledesma. Ed Ledesma is a contemporary of Lindy. They worked together on the CCP theater, and then he told me that he found it remarkable that the slopes of the CCP theater is still intact even through all these years, even with children running up and down. It hasn't cracked. And I think there's a particular formula there that he used. But Gis, you mentioned before that it was something that's lost already.
Right.
Yeah.
So with the rehabilitation of CCP, we've been looking through all the files and trying to find the technical specifications, which of course, this is documentation from 50 years ago, so none of it's been digitized, and none of it is complete. If you think about the construction of PICC, for example, a bunch are in the drawings, but half of the detailing you'd expect as in the cuento, they were all done on the backs of cement bags. No, so none of these things last. These are the ephemera of construction, of the instruction set of construction that don't make it into the future. So that don't actually last. So with things like CCP, we haven't actually been able to find the right mixtures for what went into the concrete specifically, nor will we be able to actually reconstruct things because of things like sourcing the aggregates. So you can imagine CCP actually has around 6 to 8 different types of reinforced concrete finishes, between the bush hammering on the interior, the corrugations on the curved exterior. We also have things like exposed aggregate shell finish. So the shell finish, you'd expect that they got it from Manila Bay. All of this was reclaimed land. All of this was taken from excavations nearby. So there's a very strong story component as to why that was selected. But realistically, there's no way to be able to reconstruct that in a way that would be compliant to DNR specifications now. So that's something that we're going to have to come up against. What we were talking about, Jerry, before in terms of reconstructing concrete was during the course of its use, Makati Stock Exchange, as an Ayala property, has had very similar problems with all of our concrete structures where you have water penetration over time. None of these buildings were built with a manual on how to maintain it. Concrete was the popular and readily available material at that time, but it was also not a very old material as we had seen it. It was plastic, it was something you could play with, but nobody had the mindset of what you would need to maintain this thing 20, 50 years into the future. So when it comes to something like the Makati Stock Exchange, which has been around a while, they've had problems with leaks, and they've been wanting to reconstruct these things. And to be fair to them, even before they start on the works, they would ask the right questions. And they would come to Locsin, they would come to us, and we would be forced to tell them, well, the formulation for the concrete is not in our records. The company who made it is no longer in business. And therefore, it is hard to actually reconstruct that from the data that we have. So it's very much like looking into the history of, say, a Gothic cathedral, where we can't do those same spans and we can't do those same arches because we don't have the longevity of information that was used to construct them in the first place.
And Gerard, you had a term for that, corduroy finish. Is that your term? Or is that
Hindi naman.
is
ano
that you,
naman
did
siya.
you invent that term? Because I think it's
Corduroy
quite
finish.
appropriate for
Yeah,
those who
because of the
for those who
texture,
still remember corduroy.
Corduroy. Pero yung iba hindi. Talking about yung formulation ng concrete, there is a way actually to to know the mixture in the aggregate. Kasi we did it in kasi I studied concrete conservation at the Getty Institute. So there's a thing that tinatawag na concrete petrography. From that you can extract yung formulation. Pero yung aggregate ang pinakamahirap kung saan mo siya ilolocate. Even sa South Institute, that building, nahirapan sila to identify kung saan kinuha yung mga aggregates. Even the problem, yung sabi mo shell, kasi problematic din yung shell pag kinuha mo dun sa site kasi salty yun and salt is a very detrimental material for for concrete. Kasi yun ang source ng corrosion ng bakal sa loob. So ang daming technique diyan, may kinukuryente pa yung kinukuryente yung mga bakal. Akala natin napakadaling i-manipulate yung madaling manipulate yung yung concrete in the beginning during construction, pero in conservation it's a very difficult material to conserve. At saka bago pa lang yung field of concrete conservation, yung 20th century conservation, it's still in its infancy. Marami pang pinag-aaralan.
Jill, so how's the National Theatre in terms of leaks? How is its performance after 50 years or more?
So when we talk about the National Theatre, it breaks down to several theaters, right? You have the Tanghalang Nicanor Abelardo, which is the main theater, and then you have the Little Theater as well, as well as the Black Box. Little Theater is fine because it's below. There's a problem with the Black Box, for example, because the roof of that is actually the promenade around the raised first level of the building. So this is a surface that is in pebble wash finish that had sort of an interior waterproofing component to it, but that hadn't been protected over time. The ceiling itself was concealing actually large problems where we've actually seen spalling in a lot of these surfaces. So between the Black Box, the Tanghalang Hoseng Batute, and the Tanghalang Manuel Conde, which is the Dream Theater or where they show Cinemalaya, actually sections of the ceiling slab have been coming off and spalling from the rebars that are there. The rebars are fairly rusted through in a lot of areas, and we will have to reconstruct quite a number of slabs. For the main theater, the Tanghalang Nicanor Abelardo, it's very similar. They've had to do re-waterproofing over time, which means covering it with a membrane sort of rooftop, but that hadn't they didn't really do the right protections or didn't have that awareness, didn't have that funding to do so, such that there is the same amount of problematic spalling in the roof slab as well. So over time, umuulan sa loob ng theater and they've had to solve it. And we're hoping to solve that again now, hopefully with a more thoughtful approach, so that it can last longer into the future, and na meron din siyang programmatic solution, no? Not just an architectural solution that you leave over time, but rather a programmatic solution where you leave your clients a manual on how to check in on your building, because it's a living thing, no? Quote unquote. Like this thing changes, this thing ages, this thing needs care and love, and therefore kailangan mo ring kamustahin every so often. Otherwise, magkakasakit din siya. And that's sort of the sensibility that we actually need to have with all of our buildings, because we're all hoping that whatever we do lasts well into the future, and it's not just something that you construct now and leave and it takes care of itself.
So that will add to our scope of work. We can add that as a scope of work.
Maintenance
no?
manual definitely is
Conservation
needed.
plan for a building that we're going to design.
A new building.
Actually, tama yan, no? So we tend to forget. Halimbawa, kinonserve mo na isang building, meron tayong nakakalimutan, yung conservation manual. So it's part of the CMP now, no? Yung routine maintenance, what to look for, no? For 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years, at saka kailan i-repaint, kailan igagawin itong activity na to. So dapat may routine. Ang problema sa Pilipinas kasi we do not have this maintenance culture, no? Kahit bago yung building, in 2 years, mukha ng luma. Para sa UP, no?
Dito rin. Dito. Yeah, I mean that's really a good thought, no? Like a manual for our clients. Now this is how you take care of the house that you paid so much for. Okay, talking about present architecture, I have a question for you, AJ and Enzo. There's now a resurgence of brutalism in architecture. And a lot of clients now want brutalist buildings. What advice can you give clients and the architects who will design these new brutalist buildings?
What advice do I give the clients?
Or the architect
Or the architects of the new clients?
of this the architects of this new brutalism.
Well, two things. First, if you want to earn money from it and earn from the practice, don't teach your client what brutalist is really. Because authentic, in its very authenticity, this is not how we produce a brutalist, a beton brew building. Most that we're doing now, parang siguro neo. It's a neo brutalist language. It's just plastering bare concrete on a masonry wall, hollow blocks, and then the authenticity of its very finish, the rawness, it's not being highlighted. That's not.
Saka may mga bilog-bilog, hindi nila
Ayan
alam
nga.
na yung bilog-bilog na
Oo,
yun ay
peke.
structural.
Oh, I mean, for the students who don't know, yung Andota daw buildings kaya meron siyang bilog, lumulusot kasi dun yung brace ng dalawang form na nagsa-sandwich doon sa ibubuhos na slurry sa gitna. And then hihilahin nila yung brace na yon, may butas ngayon. Tatakpan nila yon for water tightness. Kaya nagkakaroon ng butas. So, tayong mga creative Filipinos, gusto natin to signifiers naman daw. Design signifiers. To put those little buttons on our interior finishes or sometimes exterior. So, yes. Of course, there's the commercial aspect of the practice that you'd want the desires of your client, the desires being anchored on certain aspirations that they want, some dreams that they want. They want this brutalist, whatever, but this is what they can afford. It's a very unpopular advice, but just don't go there. Just give them the happiness. But if you want for intellectual authenticity and you meet a client who's willing, may padron ka na willing maghintay, magbayad for that kind of authenticity, and then right now we are knowledge is emerging on how difficult or easy it is going to be maintained in 50 or 100 years from now, then go for it, because we do need authentic design. We do need authentic architecture to pepper our landscape. We've been desperately thirsty for that for so long. Yeah, that's what I can say.
Just a clarification. When we're talking of brutalist buildings, we mean buhos, which is poured in place concrete. That would be brutalism, a real brutalist building, no? So Enzo,
Okay. Yeah, for a young practice like ours, I would agree with AJ. It's kind of pseudo brutalist now. It's more of, again, it's more of just plastering. Then you get a skilled laborer marunong magtaga nung plaster so that you can follow that kind of bush hammered or corduroy finish that you were saying a while ago. Uh, but siguro if I was gonna advise a maybe the students or even would be clients, it's that even though it's kind of pseudo, but still there has to be that honesty to the material. So if you're doing concrete na like a finish of that, a brutalist finish, make it still concrete. And again, the same thing with the buttons. Of course, it's still there, but yeah, it's just more of the authenticity and the honesty to the material itself. I think that makes it not really brutalist per se, but going there, pseudo brutalist.
pseudo brutalist. Okay.
Jerry, magmo-moderate lang ako sandali.
Okay.
May tanong ako kay
Okay.
Jerry. Kay Gerard.
Yeah, go.
So, very curious question on heritage management. On a cost to benefit ratio perspective, kasi you did mention that when, especially for concrete building, 20th century structures, which most of our projects kind of belong, and early 21st. Is there a cost to benefit ratio number or relationship that you will already declare, no, it's not worth it, let it go?
Kasi even DPWH, no, for government buildings kasi pag more than 60% na yung yung cost pag i-produce yung the same building, no, at this time, na yon, condemn na lang kasi many of the modern buildings, no, are talagang suffering structural damages, no. So yun nga yung yun ang usual na pag dinidelist, yun ang usual na reason because of the hindi na siya compliant sa structural code. So for government standard, pag 60% na yung yung cost, no, of reproducing the building, ay na yon, hindi na siya cost effective. So it's better to build a new one.
Follow up. So in spectacular cases as the CCP or the UP Chapel, would that apply?
Of course not, because these are patrimonial structures, no. So the government will exhaust all its resources to preserve them because it has been declared, no. Totoo naman. Hindi ba kayo nabibigyan ng grant?
I think those are very crucial questions, no, that we need to ask. Here's to the future with even pseudo brutalist buildings. I guess when we do a second ism around, it will always be, there's going to be some sort of not really dishonesty, but with the new technology that we have, it's always going to be in the context of the times.
This is a form of homage, no, to our forefathers like Locsin, no, to try to replicate, no, in our own way yung the aesthetics of their style.
Okay, so on that note, thank you, Jido and Gerard and AJ and Enzo for your, again, very insightful thoughts about where we're going to go forward with brutalism. Okay, Matt?
So that ends our panel 2 discussion. So we welcome back on stage the panel 1 essayists, namely Aldo Mayoralgo, Patrick Kasingsing, Dean Harvey Vasquez, and J. Albert Gamboa. And before we proceed with our question and answer portion. For those who are posting on their socials, kindly include the hashtag the Poet of Concrete Catalog in order for CCA to see your pictures.
Yes, please.
And of course, reminding you that you can buy the catalog back there. It is being displayed there for just 1,500 pesos. So be sure to take this opportunity to actually let your books be signed by our essayists. Okay,
Questions.
now we proceed with the question and answer portion. Again, your mentors will be giving you plus points if you have your questions with you. So, who wants to go first? Kindly approach the mic. It is over there, or you can actually go here. Questions? Anyone?
Hello? Okay, so good afternoon po. I actually have a question to the first panelist. So since it was emphasized in the talk that renovation would be the ideal direction of these cultural buildings, what is the line between renovation in a sense of repurposing these buildings to contemporary uses while still respecting the original design and also changing the complete cultural essence of it?
Oh, sorry.
Sige, so to be candid about it, I think these two here would be the best ones to for that. So I can only really speak in terms of on the perspective of the designer, no. So like there are students that are, kumbaga, interviewing us about their own thesis about certain buildings that they're studying on how to renovate or how to rebuild, no. And their question is on the part of the firm, intellectually speaking, knowing what we know about how these buildings were designed, how they fall within a certain design arc, what for us would be a respectful way to approach these renovations or new designs. And personally, my own perspective is it's not so much always about uh, the brutalist facade in itself, but the core process that I talked about, the coherence, the purity, again the big idea, the reinforcement of the um, of the big idea with the big gestures and the small details, abstraction rather than literality and the like. Uh, so those kinds of design sensibilities, as a designer, for me, would weigh into the fact where I judge, this is respectful, this is not. With that said, these questions are not merely for the designers to decide, no. So again, when it comes to buildings, especially heritage buildings, sometimes the intentions and the backstory of the designer align perfectly with the public that views these buildings and the people that use the buildings themselves every day. There are other times when uh, the people that use the buildings and the people that view it every day find another story and find different aspects that resonate with them that do not necessarily are not necessarily the most important things for the architect. And as the architect, I believe that that part of the public acceptance and values is the most important thing. It's for them to say whether or not the facade is the most important thing, the volume, the sense of space, all these different things, because that is the collective cultural memory. So again, it's a case-to-case basis. The architect has their own perspective, and the public has the greater say, in my opinion.
Of course, again, as Aldo was saying, there's actually a very subjective aspect to the question. No, there's no like handbook, there's no rule to guide what makes one more successful than another, but you have to recognize that intentions matter. Both the intention of trying your best in order to do your conservation, as well as what the original intention was in the design of the structure. So as Aldo was saying, there's a cohesiveness idea to what the core tenets were, what the core idea and principle was, what the big idea was for the project. Whether it was the floating concrete, the grounded flight, the play of light and shadow, and the compression and release, things of this nature, and the detailing involved to get there. And that's sort of what you want to construct. With the CCP, we're very lucky to be able to work with architects like Karen Paredes Santillan and Miko Panalo and Ramil Tibayan, where they are starting us. Sorry, it's hard to say starting us off because unfortunately for the CCP, we've had to start on construction ahead of a CMP just because that's how it went. So even before we were engaged, medyo they had gotten the ball rolling, and therefore it's medyo backwards in terms of a process. Now, what they're helping us do is they're doing an audit in terms of what the things are that need to be done and what are the cultural significances of these areas based on a question of public exposure. So as Aldo was saying, relationships of people to that area. So for example, things on the exterior are naturally more important than some concealed stuff on the interior. And then there's also highlighting what are the aspects here that are important so that they're the stuff that you try to replicate versus versus seeing if asking yourself the question if the original builders had the technology on hand, would they have done it this way already? Or are we going to reconstruct this out of coconut lumber, diba? In the way that they used to do once upon a time because that's what they had on hand. So it's a very layered thing. And you have to go through the process of asking yourself the questions before you come up with any solution. Because at the end of the day, you have to justify all of these moves that you make. You have to justify it yourself. You have to justify it to the people who have all of their different expectations. And you have to justify it, ideally, to the future, why you did what you did. And sort of there's an amount of trust to it. Now, if you did the best that you could, ultimately, that's all you could have done. So there is that level of subjectivity. But I would love to hear from Gerard on this one.
What was the question? Sorry.
What's the line between renovation and preservation of these cultural buildings, wherein what's more respectful and what's not?
Actually naman building have its life, no, so it's subject to obsolescence, so every now and then it should be it should be reinvented, no, so some would be subjected to adaptive reuse, no, but this adaptive reuse should be compatible, no, it should honor the memory of the place, no, of the site, no, and of course in any conservation project kailangan the stakeholders must be engaged, no, the architect should not be mayabang, no, alam mo lahat, because all of the all of the ideas, the collective memory, we should respect, no? Ano ba yung ano yung gusto ng mga tao? Kasi we cannot dictate, no? Hindi tayo dictatorial, no? So, we should respect communal memory. Ano yan? Di ba dictatorial tayo? Di ba kasi ang architect medyo mayabang, no? Mas matalino ako sa inyo, mas alam ko lahat. Pero hindi, we should be humble enough to because conservation it's about community engagement. It should be participatory, no? So even the uses, no, dapat ang tao may say diyan, no? So even ang tao kaya niyang pigilan yung yung 'di ba? Social clamor, no, can change, no? Halimbawa, i-demolish na isang building, mapipigilan pa yan because of social pressure, no? So, for me, whatever intervention that we introduce to the building, it should be sympathetic, reversible, compatible, and subordinate. No? Subordinate meaning na it does whatever we add on, no, to a historic fabric, no, it should be secondary. Hindi niya aagawin yung attention from the original historic fabric. No? So we must always remember that buildings are subjected to obsolescence. So our challenge as architect is how to bring back or breathe a new life, no, to this obsolete structure, no? Be it a technical, kahit technical rejuvenation, no? Rejuvenation yung ginagawa ni Jidu, no? So, pero sa totoo lang, ang pinaka problema talaga ng mga lumang buildings ay tubig, no? That's the water. So water penetration is the obvious, no, na sickness ng lahat ng old buildings, no, be it concrete or stone, no? So yun yung natin, no? Kaya nga ang lagi kong nasa ng downspout. Pero of course, paglagay ng downspout ay merong visual impact, no? So ang challenge natin, how do we creatively conceal, no, those those downspouts, no? And I did it sa nga ako na yung sa Rizal Memorial Coliseum, no? Nilagyan ko ng maraming downspout pero hindi halata, no? Kasi ayun. Ayun. Si Patrick.
Well, I'll basically just be parroting everyone's answer, to be honest. But but yeah, no, I mean, wholeheartedly agree, especially with Jared's points. That it's very important to respect, what came before you, that you really take the time to understand the space that you are, trying to rejuvenate or trying to give new life, breathe new life to. And it's also very important for, to prolong this second life of a space, to really listen to, I guess, the perceived needs of the community or the audience that you want to cater to with this new lease of life that you want to give a structure. And really, that's just my point. I mean, listening, I think, is the insight I want to like add on to what they've already said. And because in a lot of the cases when it comes to what do you call this, the demolitions of buildings, it's this listening that's being cut off. Like, there's wala na yung parang step to listen to what the public wants or what the public feels about a certain space. So it's always important to learn about, hear everyone's what they call this, what do you value about a certain space? Because it's not just always the facade. It's not always just the brutalist aesthetic, right? It could be something personal. And for me, I mean, mas nagiging matimbang na sa akin, as much as I'm running a group called Brutalist Filipinas, the experiences of people, living, using these spaces are starting to become more, doon ko na na-realize yung value when it comes to these buildings. That is why when we wrote that position paper about the RCB, and people were already like, you really want to defend a building that looks like, exactly like its neighbor or whatever. But we also heard the stories of people working within RCB. We've gotten, messages from people I will not name, who work within the building, and they were sending us images, parang vignettes or parang their experiences working about the building and how they appreciate it as is. Or that's why they thought that, like people from like our team could, probably do some sort of, like voice out their concerns in a way, or amplify what they really want to say as users of the building. So, just listening to history, listening to the present, and I think those are two very vital things in order for a building to cross into the future.
Thank you po.
Haba ng sagot nila, no?
All right, a very good
meaty,
question,
very
actually.
meaty,
Yeah.
answers.
For a starter, that was a very good question. Our plus points work. Now we have another question from here.
Good afternoon po. Good afternoon po. I'm Ethan Orduña, a first-year architecture student from FDE R7. As an architecture student, I am personally saddened by how some of Locsin's buildings transpired through demolition, wherein I personally have visited some of these buildings, and that I can say that it brought a significant value to me. So my question po is that given the development of our society, wherein individuals would tend to a conventional and practical design, how can we encourage individuals that these structures does not only serve its practical purpose, but also symbolizes a testament of our identity and justifies as the backbone of our Philippine architecture po?
Sorry, could you repeat the gist of the question, please? Para
So, how can we encourage individuals that these structures that not only serve its practical purpose but also symbolizes a testament of our identity po as Filipino?
AJ, feeling ko that sounds like a you question.
What's your name? Sorry.
Ethan Orduña po.
Nathan.
Ethan po.
Ethan.
A.
Ethan.
Yes.
Sorry for the third time. Would you please state your question again?
So,
So I think it has something to do with a building not serving its purpose anymore. But then we have to preserve it because it has something to do with our national treasure and identity at the same time. Is that
sa'yo
it?
yan. Sayong-sayo yan.
First, we should educate the public about its value, no? So how can you love a building if you don't know about it, no? So, of course, kailangan mo reintroduce yung building. That's why, for example, if I have a conservation project, no, that is ongoing, I always put sa hoarding yung kwento ng building, no? So why is it important? Why the community should value it? No? Because it is through this communication line that people will know its value. For example, the Metropolitan Theater, noon iniihian, tinataihan lang yan, no? So nung nilagyan ko siya ng kwento, yung mga they are taking care of it, no? Yung mga naglalakad doon, yung mga vendor, doon nalaman nila, ganito pala siya. At kasama sila, no? We engage them, no? During the process of conservation, we have a cleanup drive, kasali sila. So, do not underestimate yung mga tao. It's just, i-perpetuate lang natin, why is the building significant? Why is it worth keeping? No? Why is it worth preserving? No? Doon lang nila marirealize. Hindi naman sila, wala. May feeling din sila. No? May feeling ang mga tao. So, kailangan din merong, kasi, for people to understand conservation, there should be a compelling story that touches the emotion. No? Diba? Every building tells a story, no? So, ikwento natin uli yung mga naganap dun sa mga structures na yun. No? Whether good or painful, no? Kasi there is also a dimension na painful. For example, in the Rizal Memorial Coliseum, alam namin that it was it was a site of comfort station, massacre, no? May mga mumu din, no? Apart from, of course, glorious sports, etc. So, what story do we highlight? No? Of course, syempre, there should be a balance, no? May horror story, merong dissonant na kwento, at meron ding kwento na glorious, no? Nasagot ka ba namin?
Yes po.
Go. I was just... No, I'm not nothing to say.
Right. Sorry. I think sa akin, the important aspect of that question is the who. And it's on all of us. Just to echo Jared's point about the architect as storyteller, that position has never been stronger. The opportunity has never been more available than now. As an architecture student, as an up-and-coming future architect, you are developing the eyes of a designer. You are seeing, you're seeing already, I'm hoping, the poetry in spaces, the poetry in details. You are developing relationships with these details and objects and volumes that other people don't have yet. And it's on all of us to share this tangible experience, to share with them this visceral sort of experience, so that they begin to appreciate spaces for more than just where they can get their coffee, more than just their utilitarian value. You could tell these stories on whatever platforms you're on, to whatever communities you're part of, so that they begin to see um, these spaces for what they are. They're already affected by these spaces by their very nature, by architecture's very nature of being the art that you cannot escape. Um, but once they're able to see it, the tendency is they're not going to be able to unsee it. And once it's there, once it's part of you, then there is no, you almost can't stop but have a relationship then with it. And that's the slow game, that's the slow play of recognizing that these are places and not just like spaces within four walls. No, there's a story to be told about every place, and it's on us to share that story with people who might not have our background.
Okay, that's a fantastic answer. So because of that answer, I now have an answer. So no, I think it's I think one of the things that really connected with me with Locsin's work is his capacity to embody that, that quality of the architect as a storyteller. So what I like about his space is that it embraces possibilities. So it embraces stories that I guess just, it transcends um, what they call this, that his present, at least for me, right? And it's these the possibilities of these possibilities not happening that really, riles me up. That's why he started things like Brutalist Filipinas for Modernist Filipinas. So I think it's also important. This is a quality of architects during his generation that, like I really in a way lament kasi parang sorry, but not a lot of architects now have this capacity, or they are not embracing the possibilities of using their craft of architecture as a method of, as a capacity to tell stories. They just want to tell the story of, parang or they're limiting themselves to specific narratives lang. They're not opening their spaces to the possibilities of more narratives that can in a way extend the lives of their structures to what it was originally designed to be. Um, and I don't know if this kind of relates, but I did have a question before in an interview about, especially if sorry, I'm rambling, but this is a question that usually comes up when people interview me about Brutalist Filipinas. And Patrick, that brutalist structures do not, especially in the Philippines, do not necessarily have the most ideal of beginnings, right? And on connotation. So how do you think? What's your pitch to make them, parang outlast that baggage, right? And I think, and I remember my answer there, which was pretty unplanned. And I just said that, for these spaces to transcend less than ideal beginnings, you just use them. You just, I think that's the best sort of revenge or exorcism, if I may say. Use them and give them new life, right? So give them a second chance. Give them character development, like how humans are, like when we change, right? So, and these buildings are created by humans, so why not, give them that chance. And we know there will be a certain point where there is, if it's a building that starts killing people like physically because it's falling apart, then of course that's where you draw the line. But a lot of these buildings that we're talking about or are facing demolitions, I think we need to. That's why I think it's important to spread the conversation to the wider realm, and not just the architects, the heritage conservation experts, the schools, the academy. It has to be a public conversation because we need to decide as a whole about these things, because these buildings are no longer just, buildings that are standalone things. They connect to a larger urban fabric, and once we start freeing at this fabric enough times, you'll realize that gap eventually. There, I don't know if that really answered your question, but just saying. Thank you.
Thank you po.
So okay, so it has something to do with emphasizing on value added in order for people to value the structure. So for our third question, the gentleman over there, you may approach the mic.
Hello. Good afternoon. I am Zerubbabel Nadella, an architectural student in the second year. So the question is, in the event of a disaster, such as a fire, what do you think would be the best approach for reconstructing, or should the land be repurposed? Especially if it is a valuable structure. Since the building itself would mostly be destroyed by then, should we prioritize a modern redesign to cater for more modern needs, or focus on restoring the original structure as closely as possible for its history?
Ano yan? Fire. Okay, unang-una yung building, concrete building when subjected to fire, sumasabog yan, no? But fortunately, may nag-test sila dun sa post office, ano siya, intact pa yung ano, yung konkreto niya. So, ano yung tanong mo, sorry?
For example, the building would be destroyed, like not completely, but mostly destroyed. So, should the land be repurposed, or should it be
Okay.
like
Ayan.
reconstructed again? If it is reconstructed, should we prioritize modern design or restore the original?
Okay, ganito yan. So, it's always the community who will decide about the fate of the building. So, to reconstruct kasi, you are denying, no? So, halimbawa, i-repair mo siya. So, kasi we should recognize that buildings are subject to to damage, no? Merong historical layer siya na na-accumulate. So, 'di ba? When destruction comes, so we recognize may mga scarification, and those scarification are part of the story of the building. Do you want to erase those memory para magmukha siyang super bago? Ha? Yun ang question. Or kasi to reconstruct, it's like denying, no, that event, no, that triggered, no, that destruction, no? Pero kasi sa Pilipinas, no, ang psychology natin, sanay tayo sa sa disaster, no? So para sa atin, even yung materiality ng isang yung isang structure, no, ay hindi mahalaga. Ang mas mahalaga yung memory, no, yung memory nung lugar, nung places, no? Because nga earthquake, typhoon, etc., yun yung parang the notion of impermanence, no, ay very basic sa psyche ng mga Pilipino. So, but that materiality is not necessarily physical, no? Pwede siya kasing intangible yung memory ng lugar, can be there but different manifestation, no? Take for example the oldest shrine, no, in Japan, no, the Isha Shrine, no, it's being built, no, every 20 years, but for the Japanese it's still original, although the material have been replaced every 20 years. So parang ganun yung Asian psychology, no? It doesn't matter, no, yung the physical material, it's more on the memory. So memory can be in aid of materiality, no? Parang in aid of legislation. Your Honor. Yun, naiintindihan ba ako? Pero yun, it really depends on the desire of the community, no? In the case of one of my projects, yung PU Valenzuela, no? Hate ko yung medyo na hinate ko yung community doon, no? Kasi pero wala akong magawa, community yun eh. I have to follow the community. There is this house, no, of PU Valenzuela in Valenzuela City, submerged in water. It was built in the 1940s, no, after the war, no. But the people, no, sabi ko, we will just raise let us save the building, no, dismantle the post-war structure, and raise the site, no, rebuild uli natin yung Ay sabi, i-dismantle mo na, hindi gawin mo na yung pre-war, yung nung sinunog ng Hapon, no? Pero we don't have a picture, we don't have the blueprint, no? But the community, no, including one of the grandson, no, of Pio Valenzuela, who's an architect, from mental mapping, dinevelop yung plano. So I had the basis, no? Pero what gives no, the house its authenticity and material. Sabi ko, i-recreate natin from from communal memory. Valid naman 'yon, no? Valid naman 'yon. Pero for me, ano yung gagamitin kong material, no? So alam ko na, yung dinismantle na lang na bahay will be the material that I will use to reconstruct, no, the old bahay na bato. No? Because ito yung nilakaran, ito yung hinawakan, ito yung nahingahan ni Dr. Pio Valenzuela. Kumbaga, it's a relic. But initially, I really hated the community because it violates, no? For me, it violates the philosophy na kailangan i-reconstruct ko lang siya as it is. But dito ko natutunan, it's really the community that should be yung ano, no, nirerespeto natin lagi yung consensus, no, ng community. They wanted the bahay na bato, and for all its ano, they love the building, no? Natapos na siya, and it becomes a museum, a centerpiece of the community, no? And it's as if, no, the people are treating the building as if it has always been there, no? I don't know why, no? Pero bago lang siyang gawa, konkreto yung core, no? Tapos, konkreto yung core, pero inattach mo yung lumang kahoy ng ginibang building, no? That gives it material authenticity, no?
Yeah.
Nagets mo ba, dear?
Ayos.
Marami, no? It really depends on the situation.
Yeah. Well, also I think for your question, it depends on the extent of the fire damage. If it's irreplaceable, like a lot of our buildings after the war were all bombed out and burned. So you also have to assess, no? And actually we were talking about the post office as a good example. But then I think concrete in the 1930s was a different type of concrete than post-war, no? But I think I also have a question with the panel also. Of the reconstruction of old buildings that may not necessarily be honest in its reconstruction, then I'd like to think about the Acozar buildings that have been, well, not just reconstructed, but transported to another place. But sige, no, let's not go there na lang.
Let's not go there. Because ano,
I take it back.
Kasi di ba, yun din eh, may kaluluwa kasi yung building na may soul, no? Parang, di ba, parang ano yan, di ba? Di ba, yung, ano nga, uso nga yung facadism, di ba? Iniretain mo lang yung facade, katulad dyan sa Mequiapo, no? Niretain lang yung facade. Pero, di ba, ang building, may internal, ano siya, spaces, may kaluluwa siya. For me, it's like a taxidermy, no? Buhay nga yung, mukha siyang buhay sa labas, pero wala siyang kaluluwa, no? Wala siyang essence.
And I think also the context of the site is important for a
kasi
building.
Contributory din kasi yung ano, no, yung site. Kasi hindi lang naman yung physical yung pinipreserve natin, pati yung memory, yung intangible aspect ng community. Kasi some buildings, no, o some places, some structures, ay meron talagang related meaning at meron mga social practices na ginagawa doon. Pag nawala yung building na yung inilipat, nawawala yun, namamatay yung intangible practices na yun. Ayan.
Hindi, kasi kailangan marinig to ng mga
Kami na
students.
nagtanungan.
Oo. Follow-up question. Connected with kay Jerry Acozar at saka dun sa project mo with Valenzuela and sa tanong ni Boss Chief about an important cultural item being decimated by a catastrophe. Obviously, doon sa project mo with Valenzuela, the community cared. They cared enough to disagree with you.
Yeah.
But from a historians and a conservator's point of view, why should we care? Why should you care if the community, the city, the nation does not care and it is ungrateful? Why should we be a voice in the wilderness if the nation doesn't care? And that now connects to what Jerry Acozar is doing. Because in his school of thought, you guys don't care. I'll get it. I see the value. Maybe it is more commercially valuable for me and you don't see that, or maybe you do, but hey, I'm wiser than you are. But since you don't care, the government doesn't care, I'll get it. And I have proof that you don't care because when I got it, you did not care enough to resist it. So, paano yun?
Kasi ngayon hindi na pwede gawin yun, ano? Hindi na siya pwede gawin.
You can't remove structures.
Kaya
as
si Mr. Acosar is creating na lang ng replica because mas mahigpit yung batas ngayon. Hindi na katulad ng dati na dismantle sa loob, tahimik. Tapos unti-unting nawawala yung bahay. Pero yun nga yung tanong, no? May tanong ako kasi merong naiwan na fragment, no, doon sa Binyan. For example, merong Binyan house sa doon sa Las Casas. Meron din doon sa may sa may Binyan mismo. Both of them for us, no? For us, it's both real, no? Kasi for me parang may relic yung isa, may relic yung parang it gives certain level of authenticity, no? Yung may fragment nilipat dito sa kabila. Pero syempre ang mas mahalaga yung kung nandun sa in situ, no? Mas kasi nandun sa community based community yung nagbibigay ng kahulugan, no? 'Di ba? Nagba-value dun sa sa Las Casas, turista, no? Darating, aalis, magagandahan din, goodbye. Walang walang mas malalim na connection, no? Other than Instagrammability, no? 'Di ba? Pero maganda pumunta sa Acosar. Go there. Sorry, nawala na tayo kay Locsin.
Connected pa rin naman kasi yung mga brutalist structures don't have the same social affinity with society, with the public, as with mga period buildings. They don't find it pretty. They judge it as it's ugly. They think it's ugly. They paint over it because they think it's ugly, it's dirty. So, kaya connected yung question ko, pero they don't care. Parang, so why do...
Ayun nga, even across the globe, modern architecture is not well loved, no? So, because 50 years na...
now after 50 years, we're beginning to love it. Because...
even even among my peers, no, yung mga classmates ko, sa bansa nila, talagang hindi pinapansin. So, it's recently lang na yung modern, because it's not old enough, no, to be conserved, no, yun yung problema. But it also merits, no. So movement, no, social movement like yung Brutalist Pilipinas are helping us, no, appreciate better, no, those unloved modernism, no, 'di ba kasi neglected siya kasi it's part of our everyday, 'di ba, everyday experience. So when it's part of everyday experience, parang we gloss over it, tinitake for granted lang, no. But with looking at education, looking at learning something new, no, about this building will help us, no, appreciate it better, having a new lens, no, to value it, no, because how can you conserve a building if you do not love it, no, 'di ba? Kasi kailangan nga may emotional attachment. Kaya yung device ko noon when I was doing the MET is kasi walang memory yung kabataan, no, doon sa Metropolitan. So gagawa ako ng program, paglilinisin ko sila, kasi sa totoo lang, mas mura mag-hire ng contractor to clean the Met than gathering students to clean up. Ang purpose ko doon is that I will have an emotional investment, no, doon sa paglilinis doon, at meron akong memory at may pride ako that I was part of its renaissance. So, napapagalitan ako ng NCCA kasi ang mahal, nagpapakain pa ako at nag-hire pa ako ng mga ng preliminary, kasi kailangan may konting turo, preliminary preparation sa cleaning, hindi bara-bara. So, napapagalitan ako ng NCCA, but for me, it was it was an exercise in public participation and intergenerational reconnection, no, to an old building. So, dapat gawin nyo yan sa CCP.
Pawawalisin nila ang CCP.
Sorry, si Dolia lang yung problema ko. sa safety pa, di ba? That's a really, really good idea.
Did you got
Yes.
your answers?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that was a good discussion. Now, for our fourth question, to be given by one of our mentors.
Hi, sir. So, I'm Architect Miguel Ordonio. I'm a professor here in Benilde, no? So, ang question ko is now, we have discussed actually a lot about the practical side, no, in the professional. But how about in the academe? this kind of an opinion based. So in what ways do you think we should improve? Kasi based on my observation, history is too trivialized. No, parang we cherry pick yung mga good parts, but as what Prof. Lico have mentioned, there are dissonant stories. So in what ways can we improve yung architectural education natin in terms of history, in terms of historic HOA, no? And secondly, uh, since may senior high na, no, ito lang mga mga wishful thinking, pero if possible, no, paano natin sila ma-involve yung mga younger generations in the academic sense?
Okay, because I used to teach history. I was talking to Enzo about this nga earlier, and then we're talking about the government and how to delist and list a building and declare it as important cultural property. I think that is something that we should teach in our classes. What is happening today to these historical structures, and don't just look at them as relics of a particular style or of a particular architect, but really what is happening to them today. No, in my previous classes, even if we were discussing about Greek architecture or Roman architecture, I would always ask them to end their presentations with what is the building today? How is it being used today? Is it successful as a tourist attraction? Does it add to the GDP of the government? Because I think we should bring history to what it is today for the students to resonate with it. So for the I was telling and so I hope in his Arc 4 we can teach them about what's happening to our brutalist buildings, because that's already part of our history. For senior high, yeah, we can also introduce that. That's why next week I'm going to have a tour with the senior high students. But I think if we can also bring them to the buildings themselves and let them experience the buildings, tour with Patrick or with the Locsin office, that could be a good start. Because for me, architecture is also about feeling. You know, how do you feel when you're inside the space? And if you can, and if there's somebody to guide them, and then, why are you feeling this way? It's because this was designed this way. You know, so I think it should be experiential, but also bring it to the moment, to the present.
Yeah. I mean, we're both here, so yeah. I think I just want to echo what Sir Jerry said. I think it's more of creating also that attachment, since we are kind of molding this students, these people essentially as future architects, as the next generation. We need to at least be able to set that they should also know what is the current, not just what is yung past or the history, but we also need to place them what is now, what is happening now as part of history, because yesterday is already history. It's not something that when we say history, it's 50 years before or 10 years before. Yesterday is already history. So what is happening now and what is happening an hour before, it's already history. So it's more of being able to place them in that current situation. At the same time, echoing what Sir Gerard also said, that these students, we can have them be invested emotionally with these structures, just through our lectures, just through being able to show them how these buildings are and how they are now, and essentially the stories behind them. And maybe we can incorporate PK as well, or with certain I don't know, just being able to expose them to the actual structures themselves, not just through the pictures, through images, but exposing them there. Yeah.
And let them draw and sketch like what you do.
Lagi naman, sir.
Yeah, bring your students and let them sketch the
Miss Baba
PICC
dito.
and the CCP.
Wala na sila. Ayan na. Narinig niyo yun, ha?
I mean, sa akin, like, that's what I like seeing about mga open architecture weeks. If somehow the academe in particular could have relationships with both studios as well as the owners of these spaces, and then really allow access into these spaces where you wouldn't normally have, then you could have a much deeper relationship with them, versus something very trivial na very commercial, transactional interaction. It has to be, I mean, every relationship, it's its own personal sort of activity. Um, all you can do is give them the space, give them the opportunity, tell them the stories, share what you can, and hopefully more and more of that gets passed along. Hopefully that's something that we can all try to do in the relationships, or something we can try to start.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Our fifth question will be coming from one of our guests here.
Hi, I'm Ricky Usay, just a private citizen who has the privilege of having time to be interested in a lot of things, one of them being architecture. Perhaps because Jerry Torres has been one of my lifetime friends, and um, being around that chapel in Lasal, Bacolod. I'm sure you all know or are aware that there is a law. I think it's a National Cultural Heritage Act, which was created in response to the demolition of the Manila High Alay building in year 2000. It was enacted in 2009 as RA 10066, I believe, which specifically state that any significant buildings, culturally, heritage-wise, history-wise, even after 50 years, should be preserved and should not be demolished. Yet, we see buildings that are of that definition that are being demolished. What do you think, why do you think that is still happening? Is it the law that needs to have more teeth to be implemented? Is the law flawed? Or is it just corruption? Is it the lack of our awareness as a population with how important these buildings are? I think Jerry, and Patrick can best answer my question, because we want to be advocates. So if the law needs to be strengthened, or we need like to say that there is a law, hey, you cannot just demolish this building, even if your stakes, even your stakeholders, and of course the bottom line is profit. There should be a way around it, not to demolish it. Thank you. Or any of you can answer the question.
Okay, I'll start so you can correct me if I say anything silly. But anyways, I think the answer is all of the above. It's really what they call this, the issue is it doesn't just rest in one sector of the community. That's why I've been rambling a while ago about really involving the community, because it's a public conversation that involves LGUs, the users, everyone really. So it's hard to implement even a well-meaning legislation if, for one, it doesn't present clear benefits to for example, the real estate developer. Like what's in it for me if I follow this law? Or yun nga, teeth. It doesn't really have no consequences or whatever if you don't follow it. And then also yun nga, the public. If we only rely on when the NCCA posts those notices on Facebook about a building getting in danger, dun lang ba yung parang point na we feel worried about it? So it's really, it's sadly it involves all of us. That's why yun nga, when we started Brutalist Filipinas, I think we really wanted to start with awareness first, because you can't jump. Jared is right. I mean, you really can't feel anything for a particular building if you don't have a memory with it. So, parang we wanted to subtly bridge that gap. And you start that with awareness. You start with making them aware what exists right in front of their eyes. Or you put a name to you put a name or a style to the building that they've been seeing on a daily basis, to trigger that relationship, right? So, and what we've been finding out, and you know what, tama rin naman yung observation na, you know, out of all the architectural styles, yung brutalism is like the hardest to like get people to feel what do you call this, a connection to, because of all the baggage it contains, right? But there, I mean, I'm also finding out that I'm wrong in that regard. Na parang I was so shocked na parang when I started the account na it was like climbing by the thousands per week, and I'm just like, what am I doing? I'm not even boosting, not doing anything special with my captions. And that's when I realized na parang it goes beyond the aesthetic, and it's really the memories that people attach to these spaces that make a space resonate with them. And yeah, I'm okay. I'm veering away from the question, but you know that's it. That's what I feel.
It's it's just quite ironic because Jerry was saying earlier that mahigpit na yung batas ngayon. Yet, like, you know, it's not being followed in regards to the brutalist building. And maybe it should also add, or you should feature the Terminal 1 being a Locsin building also. I think they have defaced it by painting it. I think in the color now they painted like yellow or something. I was on a trip not too long ago, and sayang kasi I think, like, you know, the interior still has the integrity and it's still beautiful, but yung labas, that's cement part. Again, maybe someone mentioned earlier about brutalists being just raw and natural, and the patina being part of its beauty. Yet they painted over it. So sayang talaga. That's all.
Okay, sorry, just to add, that's funny because Terminal 1, I mean, despite everything that has, you know, I mean, all the hullabaloo around it, it's still my favorite terminal out of the three. And it's ironic because it's not even the newest, right? I absolutely hate Terminal 3 for the record. But and I mean, there's just something about, but then again, I'm looking at it through someone with, I guess, knowledge of architecture and space and Locsin. So of course, mas heightened yung appreciation ko of the building. But what I think it has that the other terminals don't have is it had, you know, the drama of, you know, yung air travel, or it just feels so, what do you call this? There's just finesse about it, even though it's finished out of concrete. There's still grace about it that if you look hard enough, it's still there. Na walang trace yung T3 because it just, you know, feels like a very dysfunctional space. But you were sorry, just to add what you were saying a while ago, that even if the legislation was stricter, ironically, mas dumadami yung what they call this, buildings getting demolished. And you know, that's a question that I'm also asking myself. So what's wrong with the legislation, and how are these developers circumventing you know, the provisions and stuff like that? So that's something that, you know, really routinely breaks the heart of, you know, the team of Brutalist Filipinas, to the point that there was a point na, you know, what were we doing this for? Can we just like go on a hiatus and stop doing it? Huwag na tayo maglokohan, di ba? Pero I mean, what whenever we what they call this, make a routine posts about the states of certain buildings, like for example the case of the PCI Bank one, doon na namin realize na parang we can't, I mean, tayo na yung, we are now in a way parang we're amplifying the cries of this group of people who feel very strongly about the space. So and that's something developers cannot control or don't have any, you know, can't influence basically what people feel about, you know, experiencing their spaces. And I think we just need to amplify this in order for these developers or whoever owns the building to understand what they are really redeveloping, destroying, or whatever, right? So that's why it's vital for us to like keep speaking out and to keep encouraging people to speak out, because it's I think this is an issue that was brought about when we collaborated recently with the Cultural Center of the Philippines in a panel, which our goal was to educate or at least reveal to the public what the steps are for them to like really communicate their desire to fight for a certain building. What are the steps? Ano ba yung, kasi hindi clear sa it's not readily clear to us as well as Brutalist Filipinas, the steps that we had to do in order to like voice our or to amplify our what they call this, our position on certain buildings. We had to consult with our friends from the HCS, from NCCA and stuff like that. So that's something that needs work, I guess, yung parang communicating this to the public. What are the steps that you can do as a member of the public that may not necessarily be an architect or a heritage advocate or whatever, but you still have an affinity with the space, that you still have a voice, and that this voice is instrumental in, in a way, start veering off that needle towards saving a particular structure. Sorry, I added too much.
Ako simple lang yung sagot ko. Kasi most of the heritage building are private property, no? So, of course, the law, no, nung isinusulat siya, kine-question ko siya, hindi ba tayo nag-encroach, no, sa property rights ng tao, no? Of course, syempre, we have to protect, no, aspects of our history, our culture, no? Kasama yun, role yun ng gobyerno. Ngayon, yung batas kasi, yung penal clause niya, napaka-magaang. Pero let's put it other way around. Kasi in abroad, no? Kasi we are studying bakit hindi nagki-click ang heritage conservation, kasi sa Pilipinas walang incentive, no? What's in it for the property owner? Anong meron dito? Ano makukuha ko, no, when I preserve or conserve a building? Because that is we need a financial tool, no? Create a financial tool, incentive system embedded in the regulation, no? So, may tax incentive, subsidy, o kaya encourage PPP, no? Para on conservation. So, of course, halimbawa, tax holiday, no? So, of course, makikreate ka ng funding, ng subsidy, parang sa sa UK, may national fund na lottery, no? Yun yung binibigay sa mga property. So, kumbaga may subsidize ka para to encourage you to preserve. Tapos kasi pag pinreserve mo lang, maganda lang ba? Dapat sustainable, kikita, may income. Ano yung mga income generating options natin? So, we have to create that financial, ito yung wala sa Pilipinas, no? We do not have that. NCCA is not a financial, wala siyang financial capacity, no, na mag-isip ng ganon. So, we have to create, no, yung creative financing ba, no? Yung creative financing. Para, of course, para maiwasan natin yung demolition ng mga privately owned na mga structures. So, tapos, ang gobyerno natin, puro na lang ginagawa sa lumang building, museum. Meron pang ibang option, no, na mas commercially viable, no? Kasi for me, of course, may obligasyon naman tayo to create museum, pero hindi naman dapat lahat ganon, no? Ipakita natin that there are other options to generate resources for the property owners, no? Na to encourage them to preserve their buildings.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Sir Lico said, no? To add to that, so again, it's in terms of the teeth of the heritage law, and at the same time, the financial incentives for developers. I just want to add a little bit of perspectives by talking about let's say what happened in Rojas Triangle, Ayala Triangle, and right across the PCI Bank building, no? So 3 very different cases. We know what happened in PCI Bank building. It's gone, just like that. With what happened naman with Rojas Triangle, as you know, I worked on it from the start when we were going through the process of either the CCA approval of full restoration, full demolition, and everything in between. So even in terms of like the reimagining what would happen if we preserved the longest bay of the Mandarin Hotel along Makati Avenue, preserved it, and put an alfresco dining in that area. We did those studies and all that, no? And then at the same time, we had to do the structural audits, whether it's safe, the FAR capacity. What would happen if you preserve this much? Because you're limited now by the number of basements you can put. That limits the FAR, the financial viability. So all those things were taken into consideration, as well as the public clamor. And full demolition got approved, took it to the chin, moved forward. One case study that I think is good in terms of what can happen when the public and the developers work together and the developers see value of how the land transforms over time is Ayala Triangle. So a lot of us might know that Ayala Triangle, back when Makati was a swamp, started out as the runway for the airplanes, no? That's why we have Nielsen Tower. The original master plan for Ayala Triangle would have been for it to be filled with 12-story buildings. It would be the last parcel to be developed within the city of Makati. It would have the highest land value, but it would be filled with buildings. That's what would have happened. But then over time, Ayala realized that over the course of the development of Makati, that the role of the part of the triangle had changed. And so they started a series of different master plans, again, eventually resulting in 70% preserved green space, a tower here, a tower there. And the northern tip facing Ross Triangle was even supposed to be the Ayala Museum. But what happened? Again, Ayala revisited. How are the people using Ayala Triangle right now? Is that really the best place to put the museum? What is the social message there? Don't we want it closer to the people, not at some edge? So they put it in the original location. And the current master plan for Ayala Triangle is to distribute the towers a certain way, preserving 70% green space, and even the parts that do have the buildings have the terraced greenery, make it more activated. And they basically redistributed the FAR of those 18 12-story buildings to the current buildings there. The reason why I'm saying it is that, to me, it serves as a little bit of an example of how sort of development and heritage, history, and changing social needs can be integrated for as long as the developer has a commitment to do it, no? So, yeah.
Okay, so it all boils down to what is it for me as private sector. Just like Prof. Lico has said that, so meaning to say the historical value can be coupled with economic value in order for it to be sustainable, right? Sustainable development. Just like in Iloilo where SM converted one of the old mansions into cultura shops and surrounded it with alfresco shops as well. Okay, now we are down to our third to our last question. Let's go.
Good afternoon po. As architecture students, what are the precautions or things we can keep in mind towards the advocacy of preserving modern heritage? And what is something we could keep in mind for our future design as students in creating a call for action towards preserving structures? Okay, okay. As architecture students, what are the precautions or things we can keep in mind towards advocacy of preserving modern heritage? And what is something we can could keep in mind for our future designs as students in creating a call for actions towards preserving such structures?
Okay. Can you tell the question again? I'm so sorry.
Okay. As architecture students,
okay.
what are the precautions?
What can you do as a student?
Yeah.
Okay. I think as a student, there's only so limited options that you can do. But also at the same time, as a student, you have these agencies, social media, you have your own voice, you have your own projects, you have your own design projects that you can use as a medium, as a way to translate that advocacy into something tangible. Because if it's just something that you're saying, I want to advocate for heritage, I want to do something for heritage, but without doing something about it, without creating or using your own talents or using your own whatever the design project is, or even for other subjects, history or I don't know, tech even, those things are just left to the void. You need to be able to create or turn that into something tangible that would let not only your own voice to be heard, but also some in some way or another as an influence to your other contemporaries that they could be also advocates for heritage. So,
Thank you po.
I hope that answers your question.
Okay, for our second to the last question, it will be given by one of our graduates here.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Vince. I was part of CSB and I'm working with a firm now. My question really has to do with the state of a lot of Locsin buildings, how it's been redesigned way outside the context of its original intent. The question is, if the renovation has become part of the social and urban psyche, does the original intent of that building take precedence? Can we justify bringing back the old building and destroying what we have now? And the question becomes easy the the if society doesn't like it, but what if the society appreciates and becomes really understanding of the renovation? Do we still revert back to the original intent just because we want to preserve it? Yep.
Right. I think Vince, there's echoes of this to a previous question to Gerard, where let's try not to be like keep in mind what the community wants. Ultimately, we talk a lot about iconic. We talk about that a structure has to ultimately be loved before, and have the people have to have a relationship with it before it becomes iconic. Ultimately, para siyang Velveteen Rabbit being real, right? Um, and it goes back to the idea of yesterday is also history. Um, and a building's sort of history has to take that into account. Again, we try not to be dictatorial about these things, and you raise them to the community and the stakeholders and whoever is involved. You, I think, have to raise the ideas within your expertise so that the other people are aware of the knowledge that you have, bringing to the conversation aspects that they might not have in mind. But ultimately, if we're taking the value of the building as an amalgamation of all of the different ideas and perceptions and relationships that everybody has in mind, then your sort of voice as an architect is but one from greater communities. Uh, and that doesn't lead you to a single answer, but hopefully it leads us to a process of how do we get to something that either we can all agree upon, or a process of how do we at least discuss this difficult thing, because it's something we have to live with and be proud of, um, well into the future. Uh, for something like CCP, we're encountering, for example, interventions in spaces where uh, it wasn't part of the original construction. Say yung Archivo gift shop in the lower lobby, um, but it was definitely not part of the thing. It was definitely not part of the build. And we raise this, no? We raise this to the community, we raise this to the stakeholders, and we have this discussion, and we raise to them what our heritage consultants sort of suggest as well, which was to try to bring it back to its original glory, and hopefully we don't neglect that program, put it somewhere else, find a home for that because it's absolutely necessary. But at the same time, yung thing that was agreed upon was to bring it back. But that's because there was that agreement, and that's because there was that discussion. And it takes it where it takes it. It goes where it goes.
Um, I think it also, it's an example, the La Salle Chapel in Bacolod, the altar was in the middle, then it was moved to the side because I think the community, some of the churchgoers didn't like it that the back of the priest was the one facing them. So I remember before when it was still in the middle, most of the people would rush to the front part of the altar, and very few people would be at the back. But if you ask me, I think if we want to be true to the intent of Lindy, whether it was a mistake putting it there because eventually people didn't like it, but I think we have to respect the integrity of the design. So if you were to ask me now, if LaSalle will have a consensus of whether to bring back the altar in the middle, I think I'll say yes. Now, it will be the priest who will have to adjust. Ikot na lang siya for the ceremony, maybe. Or maybe when he does the ceremony, he goes around because I would rather that the integrity, all architects, we are not perfect, no? But I think the integrity has to be preserved, especially for that building. If I use that as an example, because Vince, you're familiar also with that building, di
Yes.
ba? Oo,
Yes.
because Vince is from Bacolod also. So,
Kasi may mga values na hindi dapat nako-compromise. So if that element is a character defining element, hindi dapat siya tinatamper, no? Kailangan ibalik mo siya. So because some of us, no, throughout a life of a building, meron talagang modification yan, may change, no? But the role of the architect, no, or the heritage architect per se, is to identify these values, and these values will dictate up to what extent, no, do you return the building to its original state, no? Yun, it's always ang unang hinahanap talaga sa CMP is what makes it significant, no, that structure.
Yeah, but Gerard, isn't it that in the operations of conservation, it is always bringing it to its original, bringing the building to its original state. Isn't that the default? And then we just argue as we go along, but always bring it to its original state.
Pero ang in conservation, you bring the building back to its most significant, no, period of its life, no? So not necessarily yung unang-una, no? Kasi sa Met
The Met was not brought back to the
Met
days
was
of the Zarzuela.
19 Zarzuela, sabi ko, dead na ang Zarzuela, babalik ba natin? Kailangan mag-evolve, may black box dapat tayo, ganyan. Ganon, no? Tapos, cinema is dead, no? Sinong pupunta dito? Yung ba in a digital world, no? You have to reflect, no, on the changing technologies, no? Yun. Miski yung yung Rizal Coliseum, for example, we had to change everything, install air conditioning, make it FIBA, yung FIBA quality, yung lighting, and also, yeah, kailangan na upgrade pa rin, pero without compromising the values, no, in that space. What makes it memorable to the people?
Thank you.
Okay, so we are now down to our last question, and it will be given by one of our mentors here who is actually a graduate of the program.
Hello,
Mr. Bachas.
so I'm Gian. I also teach in Benilde. I have a question, but nag-graze upon na siya ni Prof. Lico. It's more of about the incentive. Hello. It's more about the incentives. So, in line with incentivizing the use of heritage structures, I'm just curious if there's a policy related to making the use of it a CSR for companies. So, for example, let's say, like San Miguel, and then should they choose to rent out a place for, let's say, a big Christmas party or a big congregation, and then they happen to choose a heritage structure for it, could that be considered, or is there a policy that is capitalizing on the use of it as a CSR? And then that would encourage the demand for the use of heritage structures, and in return, encourage the demand for maintaining or further capitalizing on heritage structures.
Oo, sana maganda yung suggestion mo. Sana may batas tayong ganyan, no? Incentivizing, no? For example, corporation would adapt, no, a heritage building that will create, for them, 200% tax incentive. No? In the same way that in the University of the Philippines, when you donate to the University of the Philippines, for example, si GT Toyota nag-donate ng building, no, worth 140 million, no, yung Asian Center, no. Sa batas, entitled siya to a 200% tax credit. So nadodoble. Bakit hindi tayo mag-create ng batas, no, na pwede mag-donate, no, yung corporation or to rehabilitate, no, a heritage structure, tapos tax credit yung equivalent niya na mas mataas, 150%, 200%. So magandang or for example, if yung mga taxes, so mas lower ang taxes, for example, sa heritage building, so less ang babayaran mo sa real estate tax. So yung mga ganun ba na
yes, and
na schemes?
Yeah, actually ang baba ng real estate tax nga, even that na lang. they can't even give. Real estate taxes are not really that high if you pay yearly.
Or business tax.
Or business tax. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there are many ways to incentivize,
Kaya nga
supporting
assignment
this
ko sa
building.
klase ko ngayon, today, I have a class, think of think of a scheme, financial scheme that will encourage property owners to to develop their so pwede siyang infuse sa batas, or pwedeng sa private corporation. So pwedeng public-private partnership, no?
Yeah, I think we just have to be careful that if you, for example, rent out the spaces of a heritage building, you have to be aware of its limits, the capacity, the limits of its capacities, no, and not destroy it in the process of trying to monetize using it, no. So as long as it's within a certain framework of protection, pa rin.
Thank you. So if ever I get in your class, that's gonna be my idea. CSRing heritage structures. And because the reason why I asked it is because I think it boosts the concept of shared responsibility of heritage structures, not just within our industry. But that's basically it. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and that ends our question and answer portion. Thank you so much to all our essayists and of course to our moderator. Now get your books ready or your catalogs
Matthew,
ready.
we'll have a photo first.
Yes. But then get your catalogs ready, have them signed by our essayists, and you may also have pictures with them later and socialize with them. And don't forget to use the hashtag the poet of concrete catalog.
Harvey.
Hindi na nga umakyat dito eh.
Can you, Patrick, can you move to the center? So we can, okay na yan, Harms, kasi sobra na yung, cheers. Okay, we can sit down, okay lang. Okay, sige.